The bell above the lobby door didn't signal an arrival I could see. Two men were simply there, standing on the worn welcome rug, overdressed for the desert heat. Their presence felt unnatural. One clutched a briefcase while the other held his hands with an unsettling stillness. No blinking, no normal human movements. They asked about a specific guest without introducing themselves, their voices as flat and mechanical as instructional language tapes. I maintained my professional stance. Guest privacy was sacred, regardless of how they looked at me. Their gaze wasn't threatening, but something underneath made me deeply uncomfortable. A strange pressure built behind my eyes, an unspoken suggestion hanging in the air. Despite their silent intensity, I refused to disclose any information. No names, no room numbers. They exchanged a glance that crackled with an electrical, almost static-like energy before requesting their own room. I gave them the key to room 504, the top-floor room everyone avoids, located at the hall's end, far from other guests. No one ever chooses this room. They accepted it with a synchronized nod that felt rehearsed, almost inhuman. They didn't comment on the quirks of the motel, the ice machine's perpetual minor key hum, the hallway light flickering in an untranslatable Morse code. An all-brass key, heavy and cold, was their only interaction. They vanished up the stairs silently. No elevator, no footsteps, no subsequent signs of occupancy, no phone calls, no TV noise, no morning checkout. The maid later reported pristine, untouched beds. The mini-fridge remained full. Only the key remained placed precisely on the counter. Sometimes when the canyon wind blows just right, whispers of movement can be heard in room 504. Welcome to the Dreamland Motel, a place where stories breeze softly, part confession, part dream. Some are true, some are folklore. Some are tales spoken only once and never repeated. This is a world where UFOs, unexplained phenomena, and the gossamer boundary between realities intersect. Tonight's story begins with two men who weren't quite men. The men in black aren't Hollywood characters with catchy theme songs and cool sunglasses. These are the entities that appear when boundaries get blurred, when someone glimpses something they shouldn't. They arrive unexpectedly, moving with an unsettling rhythm. Their presence is marked by strange interactions, asking questions that seem off-kilter, speaking with voices that don't quite match their physical form. Sometimes they flash official-looking badges, sometimes they don't need to. Who are they really? Theories abound. Some claim they're government agents tasked with silencing witnesses. Others suggest something far more mysterious, beings that aren't truly human. They're too tall, too pale, too silent. Their encounters read like a hybrid of spy narratives and supernatural tales. They'll show up before you've told anyone about your experience. Static seems to trail behind them. They know your name without introduction, appearing in places they shouldn't know exist. Our journey will explore their strange history. We'll dive into early documented encounters, tracing the myth through stories that range from Cold War intelligence operations to ghostly visitations. Albert Bender's account will reveal how the entire mythology took root. We'll investigate strange meetings in Point Pleasant and beyond, where these visitors seemed fundamentally different from ordinary humans. We'll meet Richard Doty, an Air Force officer whose professional mission involved spreading confusion and potentially destroying lives. Ultimately, we're examining a complex landscape where folklore, disinformation, performance and control intersect. The central question remains: if these men in black are truly guardians, what exactly are they protecting? Harold Dahl was out on the water near Maury Island, Washington State, on a seemingly ordinary day in June 1947. With his teenage son, two crewmen, and a dog, he was doing routine work checking driftwood that might pose a risk to ships. The calm, clear skies were about to change dramatically. Suddenly, 6 metallic, donut-shaped objects appeared overhead. 5 moved in perfect formation, while the 6th craft struggled, spiraling and dipping lower. As it wobbled, the injured object began leaking dark, molten slag that rained down over the bay. The debris shattered the boat's windscreen, burned Dahl's son, and tragically killed their dog. The men dove for cover as the falling material crashed around them. Eventually the damaged craft recovered and rejoined the other 5, and then all 6 disappeared, leaving behind only silence, terror, and scorched metal. Dahl gathered some debris fragments and claimed to have taken photographs before reporting the incident to his supervisor, Fred Chrisman. The very next morning, an unexpected visitor arrived. A man in a dark suit and hat, driving a pristine 1947 Buick, approached Dahl. Instead of threatening, he casually invited Dahl to breakfast. At the local diner, the stranger ordered for both of them and then did something extraordinary. He recounted the previous day's events with chilling precision. Every detail was exact. The 6 objects, the hot debris, the injuries, the dead dog, all of it. Dahl hadn't spoken to anyone except Chrisman, yet this mysterious man knew everything. Then came a clear, calm warning. What I have said proves I know more about your experience than you want to believe. You had better forget what you've seen and keep quiet. The man never identified himself or showed any official credentials. No direct threats were made, but the message was unmistakable. The implicit threat hung in the air, leaving Dahl with no doubt about the seriousness of the warning. The first whispers of the mysterious men in black began at Maury Island. Ray Palmer, a pulp publisher, heard the story and reached out to Kenneth Arnold, the pilot who'd spotted 9 flying saucers near Mount Rainier just days earlier. The military took notice. On July 31st, Captain William Davidson and Lieutenant Frank Brown, 2 Army Air Force intelligence officers, flew from California to investigate. They met with Dahl and Chrisman, gathered debris, and boarded a B-25 bomber for their return trip. The next morning, the plane crashed in flames over Kelso, Washington, and both men perished. The FBI quickly stepped in. Agent Jack Wilcox, acting on orders from Jed Kohover, conducted a clinical investigation. His declassified notes reveal a complicated narrative. Initially, Dahl and Chrisman reportedly confessed to fabricating the entire incident, yet when questioned directly, Dahl's true feelings emerged. He was afraid, not of being exposed, but of further complications. He would agree to call it a hoax if it meant avoiding trouble. Privately, however, he never wavered from his belief in what he had witnessed. The Army dismissed the incident as the most notorious UFO hoax in history. A thorough investigation into the B-25's mid-air explosion followed. Rumors of sabotage and cover-ups swirled. Some claimed the debris was more than ordinary slag, something someone wanted to keep from reaching Wright-Patterson. The official explanation remained straightforward. A mechanical failure, an engine fire, a tragic accident. In the aftermath, something shifted. The incident became a signal that the mysterious men in black were not just observers, but active agents. Maury Island faded from public consciousness, becoming a forgotten footnote. Yet for those paying attention, this was the beginning. A first encounter with a man in black, not threatening, but unnervingly knowledgeable, politely asking to be forgotten. Was it a hoax? Maybe. But the slag was real. The crash was real. 2 men died. Harold Dahl saw something that haunted him. He never spoke of it publicly again. It was a pattern, a sighting, a warning, a retreat, like the rhythm of a ghost story. The man in black, knowing too much and smiling too little, was just the start. For one man, the visitors would return. Albert Bender's attic room in Bridgeport, Connecticut, was far from an ordinary space, filled with ticking clocks, skulls, and horror memorabilia. It was the unlikely headquarters of the first civilian UFO group, the International Flying Saucer Bureau. By day, Bender worked as a timekeeper. By night, he surrounded himself with glowing skulls and ritual symbols in what he called his Chamber of Horrors. A lifelong lover of the strange, he wasn't trying to expose the government. He simply wanted to understand what was visiting our skies. His newsletter, Space Review, was small but spirited. Enthusiasts worldwide wrote in, sharing drawings and sightings. Bender even sent a hopeful handwritten letter to Albert Einstein, inviting him to join the group. Einstein declined, but something else accepted his invitation. Strange occurrences began. Silent phone calls, static-filled lines, and a sulfuric smell drifting through the empty attic. Lost time and growing pressure behind his eyes preceded the event that would change everything. In July 1953, 3 men appeared. They looked like clergymen in perfect black suits and matching hats, with pale skin and an unsettling presence. Bender described them as floating an inch above the floor, their voices echoing inside his mind. When they entered, the room transformed. Clocks stopped. The air became dense and metallic. A yellow mist curled around their feet, and their eyes suddenly lit up like flashlight bulbs. With cold, emotionless voices, they demanded he cease his UFO research. They took the latest draft of Space Review and left Bender dizzy, nauseous, and terrified. The mystery of the flying saucers, they made clear, was no longer his to pursue. Albert Bender's obsession with UFOs came to an abrupt halt in a room permeated by the stench of sulfur. That October, he mailed out the final issue of Space Review, a chilling publication that revealed nothing, yet everything. The mystery of flying saucers, he wrote, was no longer mysterious. A higher source knew the truth, but was withholding information. For nearly 10 years, Bender remained silent. Speculation ran wild. Bridgeport newspapers buzzed with headlines about mysterious visitors halting a UFO researcher. Some claimed he had uncovered a profound secret and been silenced, while others believed he had simply broken down. In 1962, Bender finally spoke through his book Flying Saucers and the Three Men. He described beings from a distant planet called Kazakh, who traveled between dimensions. These entities wore human shapes like masks, revealing something entirely different underneath. Accompanying them were beautiful women in white uniforms who observed him, visited his dreams, and exerted a strange telepathic pressure. Gray Barker, a fellow UFO researcher and early IFSB member, had partially told this story earlier. In his 1956 book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, he coined the now legendary phrase, Men in Black, a simple label that captured an entire archetype of mysterious, pressuring visitors. Barker himself was a colorful character, a former English teacher turned paranormal writer. He loved exploring the strange and fringe. Friends described him as charming and theatrical, but also sometimes unreliable. He wasn't above inventing quotes or staging elaborate pranks to stir up interest. Readers responded to Bender's account with mixed reactions. Some found it captivating, others deeply unsettling, and many dismissed it as nonsense. But Barker believed the story needed to be told, framing Bender as a man who had gotten too close to a dangerous truth, a man who was visited, warned, and ultimately silenced. The legacy of Albert Bender's Men in Black started as something far from myth, yet myth is precisely what it became. No one knew quite how to categorize these strange encounters. Newspapers dismissed it as a hoax, psychologists labeled it a delusion, and UFO enthusiasts saw it as an elaborate cover-up. Bender himself never sought attention or tried to convince anyone of his experience. After publishing his book, he vanished from public view. Yet his story didn't disappear. Instead, it lingered like a strange, mysterious warning, a sudden silence that resonated. In the years following Bender's account, others stepped forward. Witnesses, researchers, and contactees shared eerily similar stories. Each narrative carried familiar elements. Dark-suited figures, unexpected knocks, and an overwhelming sense that some knowledge was forbidden. These stories shared a common thread, whether whispered over coffee or tucked away in confidential memos. They evoked vivid sensations, creaking floorboards in an attic, sulphurous air, ticking clocks, and the haunting presence of three mysterious men. An archetype emerged from Bender's experience. The Men in Black weren't government agents, but guardians of hidden truths. They became a warning wrapped in dark suits, a silent intrusion that suggests, stop asking questions. They multiplied not through headlines, but through whispers, strange phone calls, and unexplained tape recorder incidents. After 1953, they expanded beyond Bender's attic, appearing in motel rooms, farmhouse porches, and quietly idling late-model cars. Their appearances varied. Some wore perfectly tailored suits that seemed slightly off. Others wore makeup attempting to blend in. Some blinked unnaturally slow, while some didn't blink at all. With each story, the mystery only deepened. A notable incident occurred in 1967 in Toledo, Ohio. Robert Richardson claimed he'd struck a flying saucer while driving at night. After collecting a piece of metal from the impact site and submitting it to researchers, two men in black suits visited his home. They made no introductions, asked no pleasantries. They simply demanded the metal. These encounters transformed from isolated incidents into a phenomenon, blurring lines between reality and myth, leaving more questions than answers. Richardson had sent the sample away for testing. Weeks passed and two men arrived. Unlike the first visitors, these men were different. Darker complexions, colder and less polite. One warned, if you want your wife to stay as pretty as she is, then you better get the metal back. After their departure, the sample vanished, and Richardson stopped granting interviews. In early autumn 1976, Dr. Herbert Hopkins, a 58-year-old physician and hypnotist, was home alone while his family attended a neighborhood theater in Old Orchard Beach, Maine. He'd been investigating the Stevens UFO encounter, a case where David Stevens and a friend claimed to have seen a strange craft, experienced missing time, and recalled under hypnosis being taken aboard by telepathic beings with smooth mushroom-like heads and slanted white eyes. While reviewing case materials, Hopkins received a phone call from someone claiming to represent a regional UFO research group. The caller asked if Hopkins was alone and requested to visit. Uncharacteristically, Hopkins agreed. Moments after hanging up, he moved toward the front door. Suddenly, the visitor was already walking up the path. No car was visible. In 1976, without mobile phones or nearby phone booths, there was no way the caller could have arrived so quickly. The figure was tall, dressed in a dark navy suit, grey suede gloves, and a bowler hat, walking with deliberate rhythm. His skin was unnaturally pale. His mouth appeared thin, with lipstick smeared to suggest lips. A red transfer marked the suede gloves. Hopkins noticed the dog hiding in the closet, and the cat remaining motionless. Inside, the visitor didn't sit like a guest, but perched awkwardly, as if inhabiting a borrowed body. When Hopkins tried discussing the case, the man responded rarely and mechanically, "Yes, that's how I understand it." Then, with absolute certainty, the visitor instructed Hopkins to reach into his pocket. 2 coins nestled inside the container. Hopkins reached in and removed one when the visitor asked. The man held the coin in his palm and said, "Watch." The coin shimmered, flickered, blurred, then vanished completely. Hopkins tried to dismiss it as a trick, but the visitor continued. "Do you know how Barney Hill died?" The visitor answered his own question. "A heart attack," Hopkins suggested. "No," the man replied. "He died because he had no heart." Just as you now have no coin, the atmosphere changed. The light dimmed. The visitor delivered instructions, not requests, but statements. He would destroy recordings. He would end the investigation. Hopkins later recalled, "He just said it, and I wasn't angry. I just listened." Gradually, the visitor began to fade. His voice slowed, became mechanical. "My energy is running low. Must go now." He stood slowly, moving with deliberate caution. Grasping the railing, he moved 1 foot at a time, clinging to the porch as if uncertain how to walk. Instead of returning the way he came, he walked around the building's side, paused, and vanished around the corner. A bright bluish-white light flooded the house's side. Hopkins assumed it was headlights, but no car was ever seen. Only a strange tread pattern remained, more like a tractor's than a sedan's. When his family returned, they found him shaken. He shared his experience. His son walked the yard with him, searching for clues. The tapes, the documents, he destroyed them. Later, he regretted this decision. Something about the encounter had bypassed his rational mind, not through fear, but through an inexplicable, inhuman persuasion. "I believe he came from another plane, another dimension," Hopkins would say. "And I think I'm not the only one. This story isn't about aliens or flying saucers. It's about something else. Men in black who appear around strange patterns, impossible coincidences, silent warnings that ripple outward before disaster strikes. For me, it's just as significant as any UFO folklore. The story of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, has haunted me since the 2002 film adaptation featuring Richard Gere. It's a tale that captures something cold, unsettling, and quietly terrifying." John Keel wasn't your typical investigator. A former science fiction writer turned hunter of the unexplained, he had built a reputation chasing monsters and aerial anomalies across America. But Point Pleasant was different. Here he found more than just sightings. He discovered signs, patterns, and whispers of prophecy that seemed to whisper back. Dressed in a black suit, Keel asked too many questions and rarely smiled. One rainy night when his car broke down, he knocked on a farmhouse door, hoping to use the phone. The residents slammed the door in his face. Weeks later, the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing dozens. Those same residents would later tell neighbors that the devil himself had visited, a bearded man in black who came knocking just before the end. Keel's understanding of the men in black transcended traditional concepts. In his writings, particularly the Mothman prophecies, he described them as surreal beings existing at the edges of reality, like echoes wearing human skin. They drove outdated cars, asked nonsensical questions, sometimes struggled with basic human actions like using utensils, and often didn't even blink. His ultimate belief was profound. UFOs, apparitions, cryptids, prophetic dreams, and strange visitors were all manifestations of the same interconnected intelligence. Something was reflecting through human experience. Wearing masks we might recognize. Unintentionally, Keel had become the very thing he was investigating, a mysterious figure in a landscape already warped by fear and prophecy. The men in black were messengers and tricksters who arrived not to clarify, but to unravel the questions people thought they understood. By the end of his time in Point Pleasant, Keel wasn't searching for flying saucers anymore. He was tracking patterns, with the men in black always lurking nearby. Their purpose wasn't to confirm the mystery, but to destabilize it. To remind everyone that the universe is far more bizarre than comfort allows. Stories emerged over the years from various sources: seasoned researchers, frightened housewives, shaken servicemen, confused children. Each account slightly different, yet hauntingly similar. They wore impeccable suits, moved with unsettling awkwardness. Basic human interaction seemed foreign to them. Forks, doorknobs, even smiling appeared challenging. Their cars were spotless, vanishing around corners without leaving traces. They spoke in unnatural phrases, as if reciting a script poorly translated by someone who'd never heard human speech. Sometimes they carried sulfuric odors, other times cheap aftershave. Occasionally they didn't simply leave, they faded neither government nor human. Many initially believed they were official agents, but real government representatives don't ask about televisions or make coins disappear. They certainly don't arrive before a witness can tell anyone about their experience. Keel had another descriptor: Ultraterrestrials. These weren't aliens from another planet, but entities from a sideways reality that overlapped our own in incomprehensible ways. They could appear, disappear, transform. They mimicked belief systems, exploited expectations, and thrived in moments of chaos. The term extended beyond Keel. Hal Potoff, an electrical engineer from the Stanford Research Institute, would later use ultraterrestrial in academic work. He approached the phenomenon scientifically, seeking rational explanations without dismissing the experience as fantasy. Potoff observed that this phenomenon behaved more like smoke than solid matter, impossible to capture, always shifting just as understanding seemed within reach. He remained open to multiple extraordinary explanations: interdimensional visitors, advanced non-human intelligences, even time travelers. Research around the paranormal often reveals unsettling patterns. Where Keel explored narrative and myth, Potoff sought a mathematical framework to understand these mysterious encounters. Kay believed these entities moved through our world, wearing masks, not to investigate but to influence. The aftermath of such encounters was typically chilling. Researchers would fall silent, abandon their studies, relocate, or simply stop speaking altogether. Jack Robinson experienced bizarre incidents, silent phone calls, opened mail, and mysterious figures watching his apartment for hours. Dan Aykroyd, known for his comedy and encyclopedic knowledge of unexplained phenomena, was developing a groundbreaking TV series called Out There. The show promised serious discussions about UFOs and paranormal events, featuring interviews with witnesses, scientists, and potential insiders. A strange sequence of events unfolded one day in New York City. While stepping outside for a smoke and taking a call from Britney Spears, Aykroyd noticed two men in black suits standing near a black sedan. In an instant, they vanished when he looked away. 2 hours later, the show was abruptly cancelled. Officially, the cancellation was attributed to creative differences. The studio wanted lighter content, while Aykroyd aimed for serious conversations. However, the timing was suspicious, especially considering the planned interview with Dr. Stephen Greer and UFO conspiracy theorist Stephen Bassett. The stories surrounding these encounters aren't always credible. Some were hoaxes, others retracted, and many seemed too bizarre to believe. Yet a consistent pattern emerged, not a definitive shape, but a haunting shadow, suggesting someone was watching the watchers. John Keel himself eventually succumbed to this pervasive unease. He began distrusting fundamental aspects of reality, feeling that even time and communication were becoming unreliable, flickering like an old film. John Keel's investigation of the Mothman led him into a strange narrative where he became the man in black. The phenomenon wasn't just about disrupting schedules, it penetrated deeper, burrowing into people's emotional cores and thoughts. Witnesses describe an unsettling experience that goes beyond typical encounters. Something intangible seems to reach inside them, rearranging their inner landscape and leaving behind feelings of dread, confusion, and obsession. The men in black aren't simply government agents in dark suits. As you observe them, they become less human, their faces blur, movements glitch. They're more like mirrors or symbols that are acutely aware of being watched. Their appearances aren't always linked to UFO sightings. Sometimes they manifest as a sudden presence, an unexplained door knock, or a dream that lingers unnaturally. Indigenous traditions across North America tell similar stories of shape-shifting entities that mimic living beings. These spirit mimics look almost human, your uncle, neighbor, or even yourself, but something fundamental feels wrong. Their voices sound rehearsed, their knowledge suspiciously extensive. Different cultures describe variations of these beings. The Kushtaka of the Pacific Northwest lure travelers with childlike cries. Navajo skinwalkers steal faces and move under darkness. Water babies in the Great Basin use infant cry mimicry to draw people toward death. These entities typically appear at liminal moments after deaths, before disasters, in the wake of strange events. Their purpose isn't comfort or explanation, but destabilization and disorientation. Researchers like Brad Steiger and Nick Redern have documented these interdimensional impersonators. Their clothing might be outdated, their behaviors slightly off, creating an uncanny sense that something isn't right. These mysterious beings move like ghosts between reality and imagination. Their behavior defies understanding. They speak in cryptic language, struggle with basic human actions, and seem to possess knowledge that shouldn't be possible. Jenny Randalls, a former British UFO Research Association director, highlighted a fascinating pattern. Whether they appear as fairies, demons, or men in black, these entities share a remarkable ability. They seamlessly adapt to cultural contexts, transforming their appearance to match our deepest fears. Gregory Little, a psychologist studying native cosmology, offers a radical perspective. What if these figures, grey aliens, men in black, aren't government agents or extraterrestrial visitors? Instead, they might be spiritual imposters, entities from another dimension of existence, whose appearances echo ancient mythological narratives. The concept sounds remarkably similar to Tulpas, a profound idea from Tibetan mysticism later explored by Western occultists. A tulpa represents a thought form so powerful it materializes through collective belief and imagination. Could the men in black be manifestations of cultural expectations? Or perhaps they're archetypal mimics that absorb and reflect our anxieties to gain substance? Jack Vallet's work in The Invisible College suggests something even more intriguing: the UFO phenomenon isn't a straightforward communication, but a complex psychological mechanism, a conditioning system designed to expand our perceptual boundaries. These enigmatic figures transcend mere folklore. They become living mirrors, reflecting our deepest concerns about secrecy, surveillance, and identity. Their origins might not trace to governmental conspiracies or alien encounters, but to a liminal space where thoughts crystallize, stories become masks, and unseen intelligences observe. Consider Philip K. Dick, a science fiction author who lived at the intersection of paranoia and profound insight. He believed impossible things, that the Roman Empire never truly ended, that a mysterious pink light could transmit alien knowledge during a routine dental procedure. His work constantly probed the fragile boundaries between perception and reality. Belief and reality blur in a world where time loops and people are copies. Philip K. Dick hinted at this complexity during a 1977 speech in Metz, France, saying, "If you find this world bad, you should see some of the others." His worldview painted reality as a malleable construct, with unseen forces constantly editing timelines. In this framework, men in black aren't just agents, they're system architects and maintenance workers. They're corrective software, stepping in when someone approaches the core of understanding. George Norley's 2011 film, based on Dick's 1954 short story Adjustment Team, captures this concept vividly. The film's agents arrive in sharp suits, with hats serving as power conduits that open doors to new realities. They reroute lives to match an unseen plan, appearing before you realize you've deviated from the script. Their approach mirrors the Men in Black, formal, precise, and purpose-driven. They intervene, correct, and vanish, not to confront, but to erase. By 2025, the suit and hat have become potent symbols of control, transcending government imagery. The line between fiction and reality grows increasingly blurred. Is reality shaped by repeated storytelling? This isn't just a social media trend, but a profound exploration in philosophy, mysticism, and parapsychology. Grasping an elusive reality can be exhausting. Sometimes it manifests through subtle signals. A knock, a phone call, a dream that feels too real. But let's ground ourselves in tangible experiences. Not all Men in Black are ethereal beings. Some wear official badges. Some carry government clipboards. Some arrive in broad daylight with an official vehicle and a practiced smile. They don't vanish mysteriously. They leave behind paperwork and sometimes wreckage. These encounters challenge our understanding of reality, revealing layers of complexity just beneath the surface of what we perceive as ordinary. Men trained in psychological operations and counterintelligence aren't dream figures or spirit mimics. They're real people who somehow play the same role, casting doubt on memories, telling people to forget, and feeding stories so bizarre they blur the line between fact and myth. Sometimes they arrive with an official clearance code, sometimes they don't. But what makes their actions truly unsettling isn't just what they've said before, it's that they were permitted to say it at all. In this world, truth can become a razor-sharp weapon, cutting deeper than any lie when wielded by the right hands. We're about to explore one of the strangest and most tragic episodes in UFO history, the story of Paul Bennewitz and Richard Doty. Bennewitz was a bright physicist who founded Thunder Scientific Laboratories, located near Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. In 1979, from his building's roof, he began observing strange lights over the Manzano Mountains. He meticulously recorded unexplained radio signals, intercepted what he believed were non-human transmissions, and started compiling his findings. This caught the attention of the U.S. Air Force, specifically Richard Doty, a special agent whose job involved counterintelligence, surveillance, and strategic obfuscation. In October 1980, Doty and his colleagues started meeting with Bennewitz, examining his footage and listening to his intercepts while revealing very little. Then Doty made a calculated move. He delivered a forged document to Bennewitz that looked official, referencing alien bodies, a UFO crash, and a site in the Manzano weapons storage area. This wasn't a leak, but a deliberate plant. Declassified records and congressional testimony reveal a simple goal: confuse Bennewitz, distract him, and send him down a misleading path. The strategy worked. Over the next year, the disinformation web grew more intricate. Bennewitz received additional fabricated documents, including a memo about Project Aquarius, describing joint U.S. alien operations and Majestic 12. He was even provided software supposedly meant to decode alien transmissions. Bill Moore, a civilian UFO researcher, was recruited alongside Doty to feed fabricated stories to Bennewitz. Even though Moore later claimed reluctance, the outcome remained the same. Bennewitz, already susceptible to such narratives, fully embraced the fictional account. His beliefs spiraled quickly. Underground bases, alien abductions, government infiltration, all became real to him. He even became convinced that his wife had been implanted with a tracking device. The consequences were severe. In 1988, Bennewitz suffered a complete mental breakdown and was hospitalized. What could have been the end of the story instead became something more. In 1989, Bill Moore publicly disclosed the truth at the Mion Symposium. He admitted to helping the government spread misinformation to Bennewitz. Subsequent journalistic investigations and document releases in the 1990s exposed the full operations details, Multiple official documents confirmed the manipulation. A 1992 CIA memo explicitly stated that Bennewitz was targeted for psychological destabilization by the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. A 2024 congressional hearing further revealed that Doty had delivered a forged memo to Bennewitz on November 17, 1980, admitting he was instructed to do so. The reason was simple, yet calculated. Bennewitz had accidentally detected a classified NSA program at Kirtland. His rudimentary equipment had uncovered something he wasn't supposed to see. Rather than directly confronting him, the Air Force chose to disorient him, pushing him towards fantasy and ultimately madness. The operation's impact extends far beyond its original scope. Researchers like Greg Bishop and Mark Pillington argue that core elements of modern UFO mythology, Majestic 12, Dulce Base, secret alien treaties, can be directly traced to this disinformation campaign. What began as a psychological smoke screen evolved into a comprehensive belief system. However, the narrative isn't entirely straightforward. While Bennewitz received deliberately fabricated information, some independent evidence suggests potential complexity in certain claims. Dulce, alien abductions, Majestic 12, these aren't just fictional constructs. Paper trails, unexplained government expenditures, and first-hand testimonies suggest a more nuanced reality, challenging simple dismissal of these narratives. Ufology remains a field of endless debate, but one thing stands firmly clear: the impact on Paul Bennewitz was deliberate and devastating. The Air Force Office of Special Investigation and Richard Doty orchestrated a systematic breakdown. Their intention was to shatter a man's reality, pushing him into institutionalization through carefully crafted deception. Where the truth exists within this manufactured narrative remains uncertain. Doty's story reveals a more sinister version of the Men in Black than UFO folklore suggests. These weren't mysterious, interdimensional beings, but calculated agents of disinformation. His own narrative has shifted over the years, sometimes defending his actions as national security measures, other times claiming he was simply following orders. Documents tell a stark truth. A civilian was deliberately manipulated into paranoia and mental collapse. Far from fading into obscurity, Doty has since become surprisingly visible. He now openly discusses the very tactics he once employed in secret, admitting to planting false stories, infiltrating UFO groups, and coordinating with media outlets to shape public perception. His revelations draw uncomfortable parallels with Project Mockingbird, the CIA's confirmed Cold War program of press manipulation. Here emerges a chilling possibility. The truth can be a weapon, and sometimes the most effective way to hide it is to bury it in noise and confusion. In this landscape, mystery isn't about what's hidden, but what's manufactured. Witnesses become unreliable. Researchers chase shadows. The actual truth slips away, obscured by layers of deliberate misdirection. Cover-ups aren't always about classified files and clandestine phone calls. Sometimes control looks like noise, a constant stream of conflicting information that makes clarity impossible. During the Cold War, national security agencies faced an unexpected challenge: public fascination with UFOs. Reports about flying saucers were flooding communication channels, potentially disrupting military operations, and even providing cover for foreign surveillance. The response was strategic and subtle. Operation Mockingbird, a CIA program, had already demonstrated how powerful media manipulation could be. Journalists were recruited, editors were briefed, and both were paid to shape narratives. The goal wasn't just controlling what was said, but managing how information was perceived. For UFOs, the approach was ingenious: ridicule as containment. Witnesses were painted as cranks, researchers as fringe eccentrics. The truth wasn't erased, but drowned in laughter, parody, and late-night jokes. Men in Black became cartoonish characters, transforming serious encounters into punchlines. Popular culture played a crucial role. Hollywood movies like the one with Suits, Shades, and an extraterrestrial cleanup crew turned serious topics into entertainment. Buried within these narratives was a profound insight. Sometimes the most accurate information hides in plain sight. Consider the tabloids in these stories. Those hot sheets with outlandish headlines about aliens and psychic pets. Ironically, within the narrative, these seemingly absurd stories were actually true. This wasn't just clever storytelling. It was a commentary on misinformation. The strategy worked by overwhelming serious discourse with noise. When something needed to remain hidden, it could slip away unnoticed, camouflaged by surrounding ridiculousness. The connection between media manipulation and UFO narratives was both subtle and powerful. Ultimately, the full scope of such programs remains debated. But one thing is clear: if manipulation worked once, why would those in power ever completely stop? Thousands walk past it every day, never pausing to read or understand. The legacy of disinformation isn't about disproving, it's about discrediting, about reshaping a subject just enough to turn it into a joke and then dropping it back into public discourse. When you've laughed at something repeatedly, you stop searching for deeper meaning. These shadowy figures show up everywhere in our cultural imagination. In the X-Files, they're the smoking man in the syndicate, faceless men in trench coats, whose purpose isn't discovering truth, but burying it, deciding what the public can handle, erasing inconvenient narrative fragments. In The Matrix, they're literal system agents, men in sharp suits and dark ties, sent not to investigate but to suppress, to keep you asleep inside a controlled reality. We don't just imagine men in black. We need them as symbols, as fears, as projections of a persistent suspicion that someone else is pulling strings behind the scenes. Not aliens or demons, just nameless, invisible men. Here's the cruel twist: they made it worse. By attempting to kill the story, they made it immortal. Every piece of disinformation, every whispered rumor about secret bases and hybrid programs, every mysterious official visit, it all coalesced into an unretractable mythology. Once men in black entered the narrative, even legitimate officials with credentials started looking suspicious. The archetype took hold: a black car on a quiet street, a midnight door knock, a suit-wearing man avoiding eye contact. Was it just an agent? Something else entirely? It doesn't matter. The Men in Black concept became self-sustaining, no longer requiring a specific program or mission, living in a feedback loop where fiction transforms into belief, and belief reshapes perception. One lie told to one person multiplied. 1,000 stories, 1,000 sightings, whispers spreading through UFO conventions, chat rooms, Reddit threads, and late-night radio shows. In the end, what's harder to untangle than a cover-up? A cover-up so complex that understanding becomes impossible. Men in Black have always been a mystery, but their nature seems to be shifting. Where government agents once wore fedoras, they now might manipulate digital landscapes. Bennewitz is gone. Doty has retired. The old files gather dust, but strange encounters continue. People still report unsettling interactions. Visitors with slightly off appearances, flat voices. Encounters that feel real but leave no physical trace. Strangely, these modern experiences don't always follow UFO sightings. Sometimes they emerge without clear explanation. A random phone call, an unexplained car parked outside. Are these figures government agents, psychic projections, manifestations of collective belief looping back into reality? In our world of surveillance, misinformation, and deep fakes, their methods have become more subtle. Physical confrontation seems unnecessary. They might simply alter an algorithm, make a file vanish, or shadow ban uncomfortable questions. The control system, whatever it represents, no longer requires direct intervention. Yet the archetype persists. Fear adapts. Myths endure. Shadows continue to chase us. Some view them as government operatives, others see psychological projections. Tulpa-like echoes dressed in tailored suits. A few believe they're guardians of profound secrets so complex they disguise themselves as absurdity. Their purpose remains uncertain. Are they protecting us from truths we can't comprehend? Or ensuring we never ask the right questions? They inhabit the borderlands of reason, knocking silently, speaking without words, following without movement. Like Room 504's enigmatic morning, no checkout, no footsteps, just a triangle of dust and the faint smell of ozone. The bed cold, the mirror fobbed, no names, no luggage. Only the lingering sense of an unexplained presence. They were just there, standing on the rug with the faded welcome text. 2 men overdressed for the desert. One carried a briefcase, the other held his hands a little too still. I didn't see them blink. The bell above the lobby door made its usual sad little ding, but I don't remember seeing the door open. Without names or pleasantries, they asked if a certain guest was staying at the Dreamland Motel. Their voices were flat but polite, like someone who had studied how to speak English from airport instructional videos. I told them we don't share information about our guests. They didn't argue, just looked at me in a way that made me want to take a long shower afterwards. Something persuasive hung in the air, a pressure behind my eyes, a suggestion without words. Still, I held the line, no names, no room numbers. They exchanged a glance that felt like static and then asked for a room of their own. I handed them the key to room 504, top floor, end of the hall, away from the other guests. It's one of those rooms the housekeeping staff always avoid if they can help it. No one ever asks for 504. They didn't flinch, just nodded once in perfect unison. They didn't comment on the hall light that flickers Morse code nobody's been able to translate, or the ice machine that always hums in a minor key outside the door. They just took the key, an old brass one, real heavy, and vanished up the stairwell. No elevator ride, no footsteps. No phone call for towels, no midnight TV static, no checkout in the morning. Just the key, placed neatly on the counter, cold to the touch. The maid said the beds were still made. No drinks taken from the mini refrigerator. We don't talk about room 504 much, but every now and then when the wind comes in from the canyon just right, you can hear them pacing in there. And when they leave something behind, a distortion in memory, a coin that isn't there, a thought that wasn't yours. If they're real, then truth is stranger than belief. If they're not, then the men in black are proof the belief itself can shape the world we live in. Thank you for spending the night with us. If you enjoyed your stay at the Dreamland Motel, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review at the front desk. Just remember, not every guest signs the register, and not every shadow is just a trick of the light. Good night. Welcome to the Dreamland Motel. Check-in's always open, and a quiet room near the back awaits you, where the neon doesn't quite reach. This is a place where stories unfold softly, like hushed confessions or fragmented dreams. Some are true, some are folklore, some are stories you'll hear only once and never speak of again. Tonight, we're diving into the world of the Men in Black. Not the movie characters with theme songs and sunglasses, but the real ones who appear when you see too much. The ones who move differently, who know your name without you saying it. Who are they really? More than just government agents, these figures exist in a strange landscape between reality and something else. Some claim they're sent to silence witnesses. Others suggest they're something entirely non-human, too tall, too pale, too quiet. They arrive unexpectedly, before you've told anyone what you saw, sometimes with official-looking badges, sometimes with nothing but an unsettling presence and static crackling in their wake. Their encounters read like a mix of spy thrillers and ghost stories. Cold War intrigue blends with supernatural whispers, visitors who don't quite breathe right, cars that vanish when you blink. These are the guardians of hidden truths, the men in black who operate in the thin space between our world and whatever lies just beyond. If you like what you hear, consider supporting us. It helps keep the neon flashing and the shadows where they belong. Now, let's begin our journey into their earliest documented encounters. We'll dive into a story that sparked the entire Men in Black legend, starting with Harold Dahl's extraordinary day on the water near Maury Island. On June 21st, 1947, Dahl was patrolling with his teenage son, 2 crewmen, and a dog scanning for driftwood that might damage larger ships. The day seemed ordinary until the sky transformed. 6 metallic, donut-shaped objects appeared overhead, 5 moving in tight formation, the 6th struggling, wobbling, and leaking dark molten slag. This mysterious craft shattered the boat's windscreen, burned Dahl's son, and killed their dog. The men huddled together, terrified, as debris rained down. Eventually, the injured craft recovered and rejoined its companions, leaving behind a scene of devastation. Dahl collected debris fragments and claimed to have photographed the incident. Upon returning to shore, he reported the event to his supervisor, Fred Chrisman. The next morning, a strange visitor arrived. Dressed in a dark suit and hat, driving a pristine 1947 Buick, the man didn't force his way in but instead invited Dahl to breakfast. At a local diner, he ordered for both of them, and then calmly recounted the previous day's events with uncanny precision. This encounter introduces us to Albert Bender and the origins of the Men in Black mythology. We'll explore the blurry lines between folklore and disinformation, examining figures like Richard Doty, an Air Force officer whose work involved manipulating truth. The central question emerges: if these mysterious figures are guardians, what are they protecting, and who decides what remains hidden? To understand this, we must look beyond surface-level explanations and dive into the complex world where performance, reality, and control intersect. Something dark and mysterious was happening on Maury Island. Fred Chrisman was collecting debris from what he believed was an unusual incident. Only he knew the details at first. The full story wasn't public. Then, a stranger arrived. He knew everything, the specifics about the debris, the injuries, the dog. Without identifying himself, he warned Chrisman to keep quiet. His message was clear: forget what had been seen, or else. Chrisman reached out to Ray Palmer, a pulp publisher, who connected him with Kenneth Arnold, the pilot who had recently spotted 9 flying saucers near Mount Rainier. The military quickly took notice. On July 31st, 2 Army Air Force intelligence officers, Captain William Davidson and Lieutenant Frank Brown, flew from California to investigate. They interviewed Dahl and Chrisman, gathered debris, and boarded a B-25 bomber to return home. Tragically, the plane crashed the next morning, bursting into flames over Kelso, Washington. Both officers died. The FBI stepped in, with Agent Jack Wilcox investigating under orders from Jed Cahover. His declassified notes were clinical and detached. He documented that Dahl and Chrisman had confessed to fabricating a hoax. But when pressed, Dahl told a different story. He was afraid and wanted to avoid further trouble. He would claim it was a hoax to make the problem disappear, yet privately. He never stopped believing in what he had witnessed. The Army dismissed it as the most infamous UFO hoax in history. An investigation into the B-25's mid-air explosion followed, with rumors of sabotage and cover-ups swirling. Some suggested the debris was more than mere slag, something someone wanted to keep from reaching Patterson. Officially, it was a simple mechanical failure, an engine fire, a tragic accident without conspiracy. In the aftermath, the incident became something more, a signal that mysterious forces were watching and cleaning up. Maury Island faded from public memory, but for those who looked closely, this was the beginning, the first encounter with a man in black, silent and menacing, without badges or overt threats. Harold Dahl had seen something extraordinary. 2 men died in an incident that might have been a hoax, but the slag and the crash felt real. Whatever he witnessed, he never spoke of it publicly again. This pattern of a sighting followed by a warning and a retreat would repeat itself, like a haunting rhythm in a ghost story. The man in the black suit who knew too much wouldn't be the last to appear. For Albert Bender, the visitors returned, not on water, but in a quiet attic room in Bridgeport, Connecticut. This wasn't a desert encounter or a Skywood event. It happened in an intimate space filled with ticking clocks, skulls, and horror memorabilia. Bender wasn't a typical UFO researcher. Without military clearance, he worked as a timekeeper by day and spent nights in what he called his Chamber of Horrors. A lifelong lover of the strange, he simply wanted to understand what might be visiting our skies. In 1952, he founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau, the first civilian UFO group of its kind. His newsletter, Space Review, was small but passionate. Enthusiasts worldwide contributed drawings and sightings. He even sent a hopeful, handwritten invitation to Albert Einstein, who declined. But something else accepted his invitation. Strange occurrences began, silent phone calls, sulfur-like smells, lost time, and a growing pressure behind his eyes. Then in July 1953, they arrived. Bender described 3 men in perfect black suits and matching hats, looking like clergymen but devoid of warmth. Their pale skin and disembodied voices seemed to speak directly into his mind. They floated slightly above the floor, transforming the atmosphere of the room with their unnatural presence. The room felt changed, heavy with an unseen presence. Sulfur hung in the air. 3 figures appeared, their eyes suddenly blazing like flashlight bulbs. They delivered a stark message to Albert. His UFO research must end. Without emotion, they took the latest draft of Space Review from his desk, leaving him dizzy, nauseous, and terrified. That October, Bender mailed out the final issue of Space Review. The note was chilling and brief. The flying saucer mystery was no longer a mystery. A higher source knew the truth but was withholding information. He warned other UFO groups to be cautious, then fell silent. Silence stretched for almost a decade. Rumors churned through the community. Some claimed Bender had uncovered a profound secret and been forcibly silenced. Others believed he'd suffered a mental breakdown. Local Bridgeport newspapers ran headlines, "Mystery Visitors Halt UFO Researcher." In 1962, Bender finally spoke through a book called Flying Saucers and the Three Men. He described beings from a distant planet named Kazakh who traveled between dimensions. They wore human shapes like masks, concealing an alien nature. Beautiful women in white uniforms accompanied them, observing and infiltrating his dreams. Reactions to his account varied wildly. Some found it captivating, others deeply unsettling. Many dismissed it as nonsense. But Gray Barker, a fellow UFO researcher and early IFSB member, had already partially shared the story in his 1956 book, They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. Barker coined the phrase, "Men in Black," a simple label that captured something fundamental. The suits, the silence, the pressure to forget. Once named, the concept couldn't be erased. While Bender portrayed the visitors as completely non-human, Barker was more ambiguous. A former English teacher turned paranormal writer, Barker understood the power of narrative. Albert Bender loved the strange, the fringe, the almost true. His friends saw him as charming and theatrical, sometimes unreliable, a storyteller with a weakness for embellishment. He'd been known to stage elaborate pranks and invent quotes, but beneath the theatrics, he believed in the power of a story that needed telling. Barker's book framed Bender as a man who had gotten too close to a dangerous truth, visited, warned, and ultimately silenced. The phrase, "Men in Black," was never meant to be a myth, yet a myth is exactly what it became. No one knew quite what to make of it. Newspapers called it a hoax, psychologists labeled it a delusion, and UFO believers saw a cover-up. Bender himself never sought to convince anyone. He didn't chase fame or the spotlight. After publishing his book, he simply vanished from public view. Yet the story lingered. Not because it was proven, but because it felt like a pattern, a mysterious warning, a sudden silence. In the years that followed, others would come forward. Witnesses, researchers, contactees told stories that echoed Bender's, the suits, the knock at the door, the feeling that some knowledge was forbidden. Whether in hushed coffee shop conversations or buried memos, these accounts carried the same haunting elements: creaking floorboards in an attic, sulfur in the air, ticking clocks, and three figures dressed in black. Something profound emerged from Bender's experience. His visitors were not the last. His silence and the eerie figures who demanded it became the foundation of an archetype. The men in black were not government agents, but guardians of hidden truths, a warning dressed in a dark suit, a knock you don't hear until it's too late. After 1953, they began to seep into the fabric of UFO folklore. They weren't confined to Bender's attic anymore. They appeared in motel rooms, on farmhouse porches, idling in late-model cars, sometimes perfect in their suits, tight at the collar, sometimes slightly off, a little too precise. They multiplied not in headlines or photographs, but in whispers, odd phone calls, and the hollow click of a tape recorder that had already stopped recording. Always with the same unspoken message: stop asking questions. A strange sequence of events unfolded in the UFO research world during the late 1960s and 1970s and 1960s. Robert Richardson from Toledo, Ohio, reported an unusual incident after striking what he believed was a flying saucer while driving at night. He collected a piece of metal from the site and sent it to researchers. Soon after, mysterious visitors began appearing. The first pair of men in black suits arrived without introduction, coldly demanding the metal sample. When Richardson explained it was already being tested, they departed. A week later, a second group arrived with a more menacing approach. Their skin darker, their demeanor chillier. One threatened Richardson directly, "If you want your wife to stay as pretty as she is, then you'd better get the metal back." After these encounters, Richardson vanished from public view. The metal sample disappeared, and he stopped talking about the incident. Years later, in 1976, a similar strange encounter happened to Dr. Herbert Hopkins, a 58-year-old physician and hypnotist. While home alone in Old Orchard Beach, Maine, Hopkins was investigating the Stevens UFO case, a bizarre account of missing time and alleged alien contact involving telepathic beings. With smooth, mushroom-like heads. A phone call came from someone claiming to represent a UFO research group. Unusually, Hopkins agreed to a meeting. Moments after hanging up, he was startled to see a visitor already walking up his path, with no car in sight and no apparent way the caller could have arrived so quickly. The visitor was striking. Tall, wearing a dark navy suit, grey suede gloves, and a bowler hat. His movements were slow and deliberate. His skin was unnaturally pale, his mouth thin with lipstick awkwardly smeared to suggest lips. Something was profoundly wrong about this figure. Some details seemed off. Some figures blinked too slowly, some not at all. The stories surrounding these encounters grew increasingly bizarre, much like the mysterious visitors themselves. Hopkins would later recall that the man's eyes were not remarkable, but something was off. The visitor didn't sit like a guest. Instead, he perched like a thing in a borrowed body, waiting for the seams to hold. A red smudge marked the suede, a hint of an artificial mouth. The dog hid in the closet, and the cat didn't move at all. When Hopkins tried to talk about the case, the visitor rarely responded, and when he did, it was with rehearsed phrases. "Yes, that's how I understand it," he would say. Then he asked Hopkins to reach into his pocket, telling him with certainty the 2 coins were inside. Hopkins reached in. There were. The man instructed Hopkins to remove 1 coin. As Hopkins held it in his palm, the visitor said, "Watch the coin." It shimmered, flickered, blurred, and then vanished. "Neither you nor anyone else on this plane will ever see that coin again." Hopkins attempted to brush it off as a trick, but the visitor wasn't finished. "Do you know how Barney Hill died?" he asked. "A heart attack," Hopkins answered. "No," the man replied. "He died because he had no heart. Just as you now have no coin." The air thickened. The light seemed to dim. Then came the instructions. Not demands, not questions, just statements. The man told Hopkins he had recordings, would destroy them, and would end his investigation. Hopkins later said, "He just said it, and I wasn't angry. I just listened." Then the visitor began to fade. Not disappear, not yet, but weaken. Hopkins would recall. His voice slowed. His words became spaced out, mechanical. "My energy is running low. Must go now." He stood slowly, grasping the railing, moving 1 foot at a time, clinging to the porch like he didn't quite know how to walk. Instead of returning the way he came, he walked around the side of the building, paused and vanished around the corner. A bright bluish-white light flooded the side of the house. Hopkins assumed it was headlights. But no car was ever seen, no tire marks in the driveway, only a single, strange tread pattern, more like a tractor than a sedan. When his family returned, they found him shaken. He told them what happened. His son walked the yard with him looking for clues. The tapes, the documents, he destroyed them. Later he wished he hadn't. Something about that encounter had pushed past his rational mind, not through fear but through compliance, a kind of inhuman persuasion. John Keel was no stranger to the strange. A former science fiction writer turned investigator of the unexplained, he had made a name for himself chasing monsters, apparitions, and aerial anomalies across the American landscape. In Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where lights danced over the river and a red-eyed figure haunted the sky, Keel had come looking for answers. He wore a black suit and asked too many questions, rarely smiling. One rainy night, his car broke down and he knocked on a farmhouse door hoping to use the phone. The residents slammed the door in his face, an encounter that would later take on an ominous significance. Weeks after this incident, the Silver Bridge collapsed, claiming dozens of lives. The same family who had turned Keel away told their neighbors that the devil himself had visited a bearded man dressed in black who came knocking just before the end. Keel had simply wanted to call a tow truck, but in a place already steeped in fear and prophecy, he had become the very thing he was investigating. Later, Keel would say, "I believe he came from another plane, another dimension. That's what I think, and I think I'm not the only one." His writings, especially the Mothman prophecies, shaped our understanding of the men in black agents who aren't quite agents in the traditional sense. This story isn't strictly about aliens. There are no flying saucers, no abductions, no discs in the sky, but it's highly relevant because the men in black don't just appear with UFOs. Sometimes they show up around strange patterns, impossible coincidences, and silent warnings that ripple outward. just before disaster strikes. The 2002 film adaptation starring Richard Gere captures something cold, unsettling, and quietly terrifying. It has lingered with many since its release, much like the mysterious encounters Keel documented. Not just sightings, but signs, patterns, whispers of prophecy, and something that seemed to whisper back. Black-clad figures haunted the edges of reality, more surreal than solid. They arrived in dated cars, asking bewildering questions and struggling with basic human interactions. No blinking, no natural movements. Keel's understanding evolved beyond simple UFO chasing. He saw a complex web of interconnected phenomena. Cryptids, apparitions, prophetic dreams, strange visitors, all were threads in the same mysterious tapestry. These encounters seemed to reflect something wearing familiar masks, moving through human perception. The men in black weren't there to confirm mysteries. They existed to unmake understanding, to destabilize certainty. Stories emerged from diverse sources over years. Researchers, housewives, servicemen, children, each account varied, yet carried an unsettling familiarity. Awkward figures in immaculate suits, speaking in stilted language that felt translated from an alien lexicon. Their cars were spotless, vanishing around corners, no footprints. Sometimes they smelled of sulfur, sometimes cheap aftershave. Often they simply faded away. Not government, not human. Initially, many assumed they were official agents, but real government operatives don't ask about televisions or make coins disappear. They don't materialize before a story can be told. Keel called them Ultraterrestrials, entities from a sideways reality overlapping our world in ways beyond comprehension. They could shift form, mimic belief systems, and thrive in moments of confusion. These beings weren't extraterrestrial visitors, but something more fundamental, entities that could appear and disappear, exploiting human expectations and permeating the chaos between what we know and what we cannot understand. In the world of ufology, researchers grappled with explaining an elusive phenomenon that defied traditional scientific understanding. One such researcher approached the mystery not as fantasy, but as a challenge to be understood through rational frameworks. He observed how this phenomenon behaved like smoke, ephemeral and impossible to grasp. Instead of dismissing the unknown, Puthoff explored various potential explanations, including interdimensional visitors, advanced non-human intelligences, and even time travelers. His approach differed from Kerr's, who leaned more into mythical narratives. Puthoff sought to build a theoretical model bridging mystery and mathematics. Kay believed these entities wore masks and moved through our world with purpose, not to investigate but to influence. The impact on researchers was profound. Those who encountered the men in black often fell silent. Some abandoned their research entirely, while others moved or never spoke again. Jack Robinson reported strange experiences like mysterious phone calls and opened mail, with a man in black standing motionless across from his apartment. Dan Aykroyd, known for his comedy and paranormal interests, was working on a groundbreaking TV series called Out There. The show promised serious discussions about UFOs and unexplained phenomena, featuring interviews with witnesses, scientists, and potential insiders. But the project took an unexpected turn. During a break in New York City, Aykroyd stepped outside to smoke and took a call from Britney Spears. As he spoke, he noticed two men in black suits standing silently across the street beside a black sedan. In a moment, they vanished. 2 hours later, the show was cancelled. Officially, the studio cited creative differences, wanting a lighter, more comedic approach. Aykroyd had envisioned serious conversations, yet the timing of the cancellation seemed suspiciously coincidental, leaving many questions unanswered. The day he was set to film an interview with Dr. Sold, Stephen Greer, and UFO conspiracy theorist Stephen Bassett, the cancellation arrived. For Aykroyd, the pattern was clear. Some stories aren't credible, hoaxes emerged. Some were retracted, others defied belief. Yet a pattern remained, not a shape, but a shadow. Something was watching the watchers. John Keel's journey revealed a deeper unraveling. He stopped trusting mail and time itself. Reality flickered like an old film reel. The phenomenon didn't just disrupt schedules, it penetrated deeper, worming into thoughts and emotions. Witnesses described a profound disturbance. Dread, confusion, and obsession took hold. Something seemed to reach inside them, rearranging their inner landscape like a restless spirit moving furniture. Keel came to Point Pleasant to investigate the Mothman, but the story twisted, and he became the Man in Black. The men in black blur the lines of human perception. Their faces shift, movements glitch. They're more than agents in dark suits. They're mirrors and masks, symbols aware of being observed. They don't always follow UFO sightings. Sometimes it's just a presence, a phantom knock, or a dream that stains consciousness. These aren't visitors from another planet, but reflections of something more profound. Indigenous traditions speak of beings who mimic the living. They look familiar, your uncle, neighbor, even yourself. But something feels wrong. The voice is close yet distant. Words sound rehearsed, faces human but barely. These are spirit mimics, shape-shifting entities wearing human appearance like a costume. Across indigenous legends, they appear in various forms. The Kushtaka of the Pacific Northwest, luring travelers with almost human cries, the Navajo skinwalkers stealing faces in the night, the water babies of the Great Basin. Their presence suggests a reality more complex than simple visitation, a boundary between known and unknown constantly blurring. Strange entities hover at the edges of our perception, arriving in the wake of death, disaster, or unexplained events. They aren't there to comfort or clarify, but to unsettle and destabilize our understanding of reality. Author Brad Steiger first coined the term spirit mimics to describe these interdimensional impersonators who attempt to look human but never quite succeed. Nick Radern, a notable ufology author, documents encounters with these human-shaped visitors who behave just slightly off. Their clothing is outdated, their language strange, and they seem bewildered by basic human actions like drinking water or using utensils. More unsettling, they often possess knowledge they shouldn't, reminiscent of the mysterious men in black. Jenny Randalls, former director of investigations with the British UFO Research Association, observed a key characteristic of these uncanny figures. Whether they appear as fairies, demons, or men in black, they consistently adapt to the cultural context, changing their masks to reflect our deepest fears. Psychologist Gregory Little offers a provocative perspective. He suggests that phenomena like grey aliens and men in black might not be government agents or extraterrestrials, but spiritual imposters from another plane of existence. Their appearances are more rooted in ancient legends than modern conspiracy theories. This theory resonates with the concept of tulpas from Tibetan mysticism, thought forms so powerful they manifest into physical reality through belief and imagination. Could the men in black be tulpas born from collective cultural expectations? Or are they archetypal mimics that adopt our fears to become more tangible? Jacques Vallée proposed an even more complex understanding in The Invisible College. The UFO phenomenon isn't a simple message, but a psychological feedback loop designed to expand our perception of reality. A conditioning system that challenges our understanding of what's possible. The men in black transcend mere folklore. They serve as reflective surfaces revealing our deepest anxieties about surveillance, secrecy, and hidden identities. Their true origins might reside not in government facilities or crash sites, but in liminal spaces where thoughts crystallize and stories become masks. Philip K. Dick, a science fiction author who saw reality as fluid, embodied this philosophical landscape. He believed the Roman Empire never truly dissolved, and once claimed a pink light beam had downloaded alien knowledge directly into his consciousness during a dental appointment. His work consistently explored fragile worlds where time bends, people become duplicates, and truth shifts constantly. In a 1977 speech, Dick famously remarked, "If you find this world bad, you should see some of the others." He described realities that overlap and intertwine, manipulated by unseen forces. Within this framework, men in black aren't simply government agents. They're system architects and maintenance workers, intervening precisely when someone approaches forbidden knowledge. George Nolly's 2011 film adaptation visualizes these concepts through agents who arrive unexpectedly, wearing sharp suits and powerful hats that function as reality-altering portals. They appear before individuals realize they've deviated from a predetermined script, intervenes silently to correct and erase. The suit and hat become symbols of control that extend beyond governmental boundaries. They represent something more profound, the ability to redirect human experience with surgical precision. This exploration touches on a fundamental question: can repeated storytelling actually manifest reality? This isn't just a modern social media concept, but a philosophical inquiry explored across mysticism, psychology, and paranormal research. The boundary between narrative and experience becomes increasingly blurred. A knock, a phone call, a dream that feels too real to dismiss. By 2025, our understanding of reality has become wonderfully strange. We're using science fiction narratives to interpret our own mysterious experiences, acknowledging that truth might be far more complex than we previously imagined. Real people and events break through the haze of shadowy narratives. Not all men in black are spectral beings flickering at reality's edges. Some wear official badges. Some carry government clipboards. Some arrive in broad daylight, with a practiced smile and an idling vehicle at the curb. These aren't phantoms or spirit mimics. They are trained professionals in psychological operations and counterintelligence. Yet they play a familiar role, casting doubt, instructing people to forget, and spinning stories so bizarre they blur the line between fact and myth. Sometimes they arrive with clearance codes, sometimes they don't. What's chilling isn't just their past actions, but the very permission they've been granted. In this world, truth can be a weapon, cutting deeper than any fabrication when wielded by the right hands. Our story centers on Paul Bennewitz, a bright physicist who founded Thunder Scientific Laboratories near Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. In 1979, from his building's roof, he began observing peculiar lights over the Manzano Mountains. He recorded unexplained radio signals, intercepted what he believed were non-human transmissions, and meticulously documented his findings. This caught the attention of Richard Doty, a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. His specialty: counterintelligence, surveillance, and strategic obfuscation. In October 1980, Doty and his colleagues started meeting with Bennewitz, examining his footage and listening to his intercepted signals while revealing little. Then Doty made a remarkable move. He delivered a forged document to Bennewitz, an official-looking paper that referenced alien encounters designed to manipulate Bennewitz's growing obsession and research. Paul Bennewitz stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to see: a classified NSA program at Kirtland. Instead of directly confronting him, the Air Force chose a more insidious route. What unfolded was an elaborate disinformation campaign designed to destabilize Bennewitz psychologically. Using carefully crafted documents about UFOs, alien operations, and secret underground bases, government operatives like Richard Doty and Bill Moore systematically manipulated his perception. Over the course of a year, Bennewitz received increasingly complex fictional materials: a fabricated Project Aquarius memo, software for decoding alien transmissions, and documents suggesting extraterrestrial infiltration of government, slowly consumed his worldview. He became convinced of incredible scenarios, including believing his own wife had been implanted with a tracking device. The strategy worked devastatingly well. By 1988, Bennewitz suffered a complete mental breakdown and was hospitalized. What might have remained a quiet incident became public when Bill Moore openly admitted the disinformation strategy at the 1989 Muon Symposium. Subsequent investigations and document releases in the 1990s exposed the full operation. A 1992 CIA memo confirmed Bennewitz was deliberately targeted by psychological manipulation. A 2024 congressional hearing further validated these claims, with Doty admitting under oath that he was instructed to deliver a forged memo on November 17, 1980. The core motivation was simple. Bennewitz's rudimentary equipment had accidentally penetrated a classified realm. Rather than directly stopping him, authorities chose to redirect him into fantasy and ultimately madness. Researchers like Greg Bishop and Mark Pillington argue that the ramifications of this operation continue to reverberate through UFO research today, highlighting a chilling governmental approach to managing unexpected discoveries. The story of Paul Bennewitz and the shadowy world of ufology reveals a complex web of disinformation. What began as a psychological smokescreen through Bennewitz's initial information eventually became the foundation for an entire belief system. However, the truth isn't straightforward. While Bennewitz received specific information, additional evidence suggests some claims might have merit. Fragments of the narrative emerged through paper trails, unexplained government expenditures, and first-hand accounts related to Dulce, abductions, and Majestic 12. The Air Force Office of Special Investigation and Richard Doty deliberately targeted Bennewitz, leading to his complete breakdown and eventual institutionalization. The line between fact and fiction became deliberately blurred. Doty's contradictory interviews paint a complex picture, sometimes defending his actions as necessary for national security, other times claiming he was simply following orders. The documents tell a stark story. A civilian systematically deceived, pushed into paranoia, and ultimately broken. These men in black weren't mysterious interdimensional beings, but calculated agents of disinformation. Remarkably, Doty didn't fade away. He's resurfaced on the conference circuit, speaking openly about the very tactics he once used. He now admits to planting false stories, infiltrating UFO groups, and coordinating with media outlets. Doty claims the intelligence community maintains strategic media contacts to shape public narratives. This revelation uncomfortably echoes Project Mockingbird, the CIA's documented Cold War program to manipulate press coverage. Whether elements of truth exist within this elaborate deception remains uncertain. What's clear is the calculated nature of misinformation and its profound human cost. The story of Bennewitz serves as a chilling reminder of how carefully constructed narratives can destroy individual lives. The truth can be weaponized in ways we rarely see. Sometimes the mystery isn't hidden in secret documents, but manufactured in a dense fog of noise where clarity becomes impossible. When witnesses become unreliable and researchers chase shadows, the truth simply slips away. Cold War tactics revealed a chilling strategy beyond simple secrecy. Operation Mockingbird wasn't just about controlling information, but shaping perception. The CIA didn't need locked drawers and midnight phone calls. Control looked like noise, subtle manipulations that redirected entire narratives. Journalists were recruited, editors briefed, all paid to frame stories in specific ways. What wasn't said became as important as what was. The program's impact on American media was undeniable, leaving a lasting blueprint for information management. By the 1950s, UFO reports had become an unexpected national security concern. These sightings weren't just about unexplained craft, but potential disruptions, clogged communication channels, spooked military personnel, possible cover for foreign surveillance. The response was ingenious. Ridicule as containment. UFO witnesses became cranks. Researchers transformed into fringe eccentrics. The mysterious men in black were reimagined as cartoonish figures, no longer threatening, now comedic. The truth wasn't erased. It was drowned in laughter, parody, late-night jokes, and tabloid spreads. Hidden in plain sight, surrounded by noise that made it easy to disappear. Hollywood even played its part. That movie you're thinking of, with suits, shades, and A-list stars, cleaning up extraterrestrial messes one clever joke at a time. Fun, entertaining, and perhaps accidentally brilliant. The tabloids call them the hot sheets, outlandish headlines about aliens, psychic pets, and Elvis living on. Hidden within these stories is a detail most people forget. The absurd and exaggerated are secretly the most accurate reporting. It's a joke, but also a powerful mirror reflecting how truth often hides in plain sight. Thousands walk past it daily, never stopping to read the signs right in front of them. In a world drowning in misinformation, the real story sits unnoticed on a street corner, in a grocery aisle, or on a page nobody takes seriously. Disinformation's true legacy isn't about disproving something, but discrediting it entirely. The method is simple. Take a subject seriously just long enough to reshape it, then drop it back into public consciousness as a punchline. Once something becomes a repeated joke, people stop searching for deeper meaning. This pattern repeats across our culture. In the X-Files, it's the smoking man and faceless syndicate members whose job isn't discovering truth, but burying it. In The Matrix, they're sharp-suited agents sent to suppress reality and keep people asleep. We don't just imagine these men in black, we need them as symbols of our deepest suspicions that someone else controls the narrative. The cruel irony, their attempts to silence stories often make them immortal. Take the Bennewitz affair, every whispered rumor, every mysterious visit, every piece of disinformation slipped under his door, transformed into an unshakable mythology. Once the men in black entered the narrative, even legitimate officials started looking like shadowy agents. The archetype was complete. A black car on a quiet street, a midnight knock, a suit-wearing stranger who won't quite meet your eyes. Not aliens or demons, just nameless, invisible men deciding what reality gets to be seen. Stories about men in black have spiraled far beyond their original scope. What began as a single lie has mushroomed into a complex mythology that now generates its own momentum. These encounters have transformed from specific incidents into a self-perpetuating narrative where fiction and belief blur seamlessly. Online forums, UFO conferences, late-night radio shows, and digital chat rooms have become breeding grounds for these whispered tales. Each story multiplies, creating a web so intricate that distinguishing truth becomes nearly impossible, even for those orchestrating the cover-up. The classic figures of Bennewitz and Doty have faded, replaced by digital phantoms. Modern encounters differ from traditional narratives. These strange visitors arrive without clear UFO connections. A dark car, and unexplained phone call, a sense of unseen observation. These are the new hallmarks. Are they government agents? Psychic projections? Or something emerging from collective belief itself? In our current landscape of surveillance, misinformation, and technological manipulation, such entities have become more nebulous than ever. Contemporary control mechanisms might not involve physical confrontation. Instead, they could manipulate algorithms, erase digital files, or strategically suppress information. The underlying archetype remains powerful. Our fundamental fear of unseen watchers adapts and persists. The final evidence remains tantalizingly ambiguous. In room 504, only traces hinted at an otherworldly presence, a triangle of dust, a fogged mirror, an inexplicable coldness. No names, no luggage, no footsteps, just the faintest smell of ozone and an overwhelming sense that something had momentarily crossed between known realities. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Dreamland Encounters. Here on this channel, I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. The lake that night was one of those mirror lakes that copy the sky perfectly. Stars dotted the blacktop like ash. Wind wasn't enough to make a ripple, and the only sound, besides my line hitting the water, was the occasional splash of a fish. I'd been casting for an hour, pulling in nothing but smallmouth and my own restless thoughts. I was out on the lake because that's where my head went when I needed to stop thinking. I'd been working 1-2 hour shifts at the plant for months, and the couch at home had started to feel like a trap. The boat was quiet, old wooden hull, a cheap Coleman lantern in the bow for when the fog rolled in, and the dock light at the cabin was turned off so the bugs wouldn't swarm. It was late, past midnight, and the moon was thin and low, silver like a coin. The air off the water was suddenly sharp and clean after the summer heat, the sort of cold that made me pull the collar of my jacket up. Just the memory of their presence lingers. Some say the men in black are agents of the government. Some say they're projections of our own subconscious, tulpa-like echoes in tailored suits. Others say they're guardians of something sacred, a secret so profound it hides itself by pretending to be absurd. Are they here to protect us from what we're not ready to see, or to make sure we never ask the right question? Are they the veil or the hand that pulls it shut? They knock at the edges of reason. They follow you without footsteps. They speak without moving their lips, and when they leave something behind. A distortion in memory, a coin that isn't there, a thought that wasn't yours. If they're real, then truth is stranger than belief. If they're not, then the men in black are proof that belief itself can shape the world we live in. Thank you for spending the night with us. If you enjoyed your stay at the Dreamland Motel, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review at the front desk. Just remember, not every guest signs the register, and not every shadow is just a trick of the light. Good night. The night was quiet, punctuated by the occasional creak of the boat and distant frogs thumping in the reeds. My fishing line had been bobbing longer than usual when I noticed the strike indicator twitching, soft and polite, like a cat pawing at a curtain. Suddenly, the water around the boat began rippling in perfect concentric circles. No stones, no visible cause. These small, even rings moved toward me, spread past the gunwale, and then vanished without a sound. The lake seemed to clear its throat. I remained still, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Insects under the water's surface, a strange wind pocket. I cast my line again. The bobber settled, and the line hummed differently in the moonlight. Then my watch did something odd. It jumped back 2 minutes. One of those digital quirks you briefly notice and dismiss. My phone showed no service despite having a bar just an hour earlier. I tucked it into my jacket like a protective charm. Out in the lake's middle, something was moving. Initially, I thought it was a bird, a bright smear skimming the surface. But birds make noise, or at least flutter. This thing was silent, gliding like a marble across glass. The surface remained perfectly flat, with just a narrow silver track where moonlight gleamed. It moved confidently, then slowed, crossing an old marker buoy. Then it changed. That's the moment etched in my memory, how its reflection folded. For a heartbeat, it was a perfect silver sphere, small and bright. Then it flattened like a coin tossed across a table, bending light instead of disturbing water. Behind it, stars slid a half-degree, as if someone had nudged the entire canvas. I'd fished this lake my entire life. I knew its shadows, its floating logs, the occasional boat with a reflective strip. But I'd never seen anything move like this. Silent and precise, like a pebble rolling without touching anything. I thought about grabbing my cheap camcorder for documentation, but something held me back. My hands, once rock-steady, trembled so much the tripod would have shaken. About 50 yards away, something circular moved, checking something out. Its path seemed strange, like someone drawing with a bent ruler. A metallic glint caught my eye, moonlight reflecting off what looked like polished chrome. The silent motion made the lake feel impossibly vast and delicate. Then it vanished. Not with a dramatic exit or whoosh, just gone. One moment a silver line hung in the air, the next the water was smooth as an unmarked page. Ripples dissolved, frogs returned to their nightly chorus, as if nothing had interrupted them. I stayed in the boat, rod in hand, muscles cramping, waiting for the water to reveal its secrets. By dawn, before the sun rose, I returned to the cabin, adrenaline still coursing, needing to move under my own power. Wooden boards creaked as I tied up, and Abby the dog barked her customary irritated greeting. Telling Mary proved difficult. Words stuck in my throat like they'd been sealed shut, but you tell the story anyway, to hear how it sounds out loud. A silver ball, she said, practical and dismissive. Her rough laugh matched her even rougher coffee. At this hour? Sure you weren't dreaming? I insisted I was awake, rod out, watching. She studied me, chewing her cheek, considering. Maybe a seal, she suggested, knowing full well she didn't believe her own theory. You old fools and your stories. That afternoon I stayed put, convincing myself I'd been spooked by too many late nights. The brain plays tricks. But curiosity isn't easily silenced by logic. 2 nights later I returned. Camcorder, thermometer, and my constant companion, stubborn determination. I sat in the same spot watching the lake's center, like someone listening for an imperceptible sound. Odd sensations followed. Air pressure dropped twice, as if we'd briefly entered an airplane's cabin. My watch seemed to slip through time. The air felt different that night. A rod nearby was slightly warm, out of place in the cool darkness. Wood smoke drifted from a distant house, hinting at late-night grilling. Something about the water's hum seemed off. My camcorder caught my attention at 11:48 when the battery icon flashed. I swapped batteries, frustrated. Later, reviewing the footage revealed a disturbing gap, a 30-second block, simply missing. The tape showed a strange jump, like a sentence erased from a paragraph. The camcorder itself looked untouched, its casing completely intact. Days passed quietly. I shared less with Mary, sensing her laugh would diminish the experience, making it feel like nothing more than a wild imagination. Around this time, a black sedan began appearing at the road's edge most mornings. Always present at dawn, gone by noon. It kept a precise schedule. I managed to photograph it once, but the image came out inexplicably grainy. 2 nights later, around 2:30 a.m., everything changed. A sphere emerged from the inlet, skimming closer than before. As it passed near the dock, the water around the pilings flashed unnaturally, like mercury suspended in air. When I reached out, the space where it had been felt impossibly cold. I was halfway across the boards before realizing Abby hadn't stirred. She slept soundly on the porch, not even twitching. The next morning, I overcooked bacon and drove into town with 2 beers, seeking someone to talk to. At the hardware store, a regular listener nodded along as I spoke. The sheriff's response was casual. "You see anything suspicious besides the old sedan?" he asked. I described the light and missing footage, trying to sound credible. "You keep telling yourself you're safe," he said, "and maybe that's all you need for now." He handed me coffee and scratched his neck. I left with no real answers. 3 days later, they arrived. I saw them before hearing the truck sitting on my porch swing when I pulled in late that night. Night fishing was something I'd always done, but these 2 men in immaculate black suits seemed to have strong opinions about it. They sat on my porch with a stillness that suggested they'd been carved from the same grey stone, one with a thin, precise face, the other with a wide jaw set back slightly. Neither young nor old, they radiated an unsettling sense of purpose. My truck was right there. I could have backed up and left. Instead, I chose to walk up, boots echoing a hollow rhythm of someone coming home after long hours at the plant. The porch light was off, casting everything in shadow. "Evening," said the thin-faced man, his voice flat and polite. I responded with my name, hearing my own voice betray a composure. Stretched thin, they asked to sit, speaking without rush or small talk, as if this moment had been meticulously planned. I wanted to ask about the silver thing, the missing tape, the black car. Instead, I sat on the opposite end of the swing, trying to maintain some semblance of civility. They watched me with the clinical precision of a thermometer, checking every subtle detail. Their shoes were pristine, plain leather, without a single salt stain or grass mark. The thin-faced man's hands were folded neatly across his knee. "You fish at night a lot," he stated. When I confirmed, the wide-jawed man offered what seemed like advice. "Stick to daytime." His comment hung in the air. I didn't know how to respond, caught between confusion and a strange sense that something significant was being communicated. "There are elements that are more active at night," the thin man elaborated. "It's safer to be out in daylight." I mumbled an agreement, the words feeling foreign and uncomfortable. Who were they? What agency sent them? Why were they here, telling me how to fish? Their smiles were calculated, each word chosen with surgical precision. The thin man had a small silver card, sliding it across to me. I looked at it, noticing an emblem and a reference code, numbers precise and neat. No familiar department marked the surface. "Who are you?" I asked. "Researchers," the wide man said. "Field sampling?" He leaned forward, his tone suggesting public safety. The words carried weight. They were careful, sounding like officials you could approach with a complaint. Not threats, but instructions. "If something's bothering you, tell us," the thin man said. "We can help document it. No need to be in harm's way." I spoke of a silver thing on the water. My sentence hung, unfinished, like a rope torn midway. They nodded. Men who stored information mentally without writing. When the wide man's hand moved to his pocket, I flinched. An old habit. Instead of a weapon, he slid a pamphlet across. Plain paper, a nocturnal safety advisory, avoid nighttime activities near water. Someone wanted things quiet. "You'll be all right?" the thin man asked, his voice casual, like a neighbor checking on a fence. "Do you work for the county? Do you have IDs?" "We're with a regional unit," he responded. "We can provide contact information through official channels if you request." His tone suggested the choice was mine. They stayed 20 minutes asking about my boat, routine, bait. Questions about Abby, about dock lighting. The mundane nature made me want to answer precisely dates, times, numbers. They took notes on a small pad, writing without seeming burdened. Leaving, they stood at the gravel lane's edge, watching the tree line until they disappeared from view. Afterward, I checked my camcorder, tape, watch, and shelf items. The missing tape block hadn't returned. My spare line reel, once full, now looked different. Days after they came, things started to settle. The black sedan disappeared from the road. The man at the hardware store began smiling my way again. Mary's laughter faded, replaced by offers of coffee that felt like a gentler approach. I ventured out during the day more often. The lake returned to its normal state. Fewer ripples, fewer strange pressure drops. Everything seemed ordinary. I convinced myself I was done with nighttime water adventures. I told myself I'd been fortunate, that the men had somehow helped. I repeated that being careful was enough to stay safe. The card remained in my wallet, not to call, but like a reminder of a specialist you hope never to need. Months passed with the camcorder tucked in the top drawer. Occasionally, I'd watch the footage, growing frustrated by the missing frames that made me feel like someone was editing my own memories. Long after their departure, a brief glint on the water caught my eye, just a sliver like a tilting coin. The dog glanced at the far shore, then went back to sleep. I chuckled quietly, remembering the wise man's advice about daylight. The silver thing never reappeared. No confirmation call came from those mysterious men. The watch stopped its erratic behavior. The sedan remained absent. Life gradually slipped back into its slow, familiar rhythm, small dramas filling the spaces. A fence, needing repair, a stubborn generator, a neighbor's child bringing over a rescued raccoon. The Men in Black became just another story, something to share when you wanted to sound observant. Sometimes, when I launched the boat at midday with the right breeze and the lake shines like polished glass, I let the rod hang loose and scan the horizon. Some moments I tried to rationalize it as a trick of light or an animal's graceful movement. Other times, I remember how it bent the stars for a heartbeat, how the men slid the card across the porch swing with an understanding that seemed both a warning and a favor, telling me to fish in daylight. A neighbor told me to wear a jacket, so I did. That night belonged to owls and the singing coyote. When the sun rose, the lake came alive with dragonflies and creatures moving with fluid grace. Sometimes I still wake at 2 a.m., listening, half expecting the water to clear its throat. Standing at the window, I watch the dark and the line of birches blocking my view. I tell myself I'm safe with lights on. The card stays in my wallet, not out of trust, but to remember who warned me to be careful. We started hiking at 4:30 p.m., 3 of us, me, Jenna, and Mark. The trip was supposed to be a quick overnight to the ridge above Coldwater Hollow. Weather forecast promised calm skies, and a thin fog lingered in the valley, ready to dissolve by mid-morning. I knew this route from years back, before Lake Bakery shifts and aging knees. Our goal was simple: catch the valley's dusk view and the Milky Way after dark. I carried a small DSLR pretending to be a photographer. Jenna had her phone camera, and Mark boasted about his never-dying headlamp. The switchback smelled of crushed pine and dust. We joked, traded push-ups, our loud chatter keeping us moving. Near the second saddle, the valley dropped away dramatically. Fog pressed against the hollow like a blanket. Sunlight turned golden, moonlight silvery. We reached a flat rock campsite and set up our stove as the sky bled color. Something felt off with the sound. The forest wasn't silent. Some late-season birds remained, but the valley held a strange quietness, as if someone had muted its bottom layer. The river's hum, cricket chatter, distant ATV sounds existed only at a whisper. "Do you hear that?" Jenna asked. Talking about subtle weather changes is how people confirm they're not imagining things. We ate, watching the sun's last light smear across the eastern boulder. Night had settled softly around us, our headlamps off. The valley spread beneath us, a quiet canvas. Mark shared stories about raccoon chases, and we laughed, our eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness. By 9, the last sunset colors faded. That's when the fog began filling with pinpoints of light. At first we thought they were hikers moving between cars and cabins down in the hollow. But these lights were different. Steady, rising and lowering like breath, splitting and rejoining like schools of fish. Jenna zoomed in with her phone, revealing dozens of tiny white lights drifting beneath the fog. They weren't on any road. We watched, transfixed by something beautifully strange. The lights moved with impossible precision, skimming tree lines, sweeping toward the valley's center, then circling back in perfect arcs. No sound accompanied their dance. The fog swallowed everything, making the lights feel almost supernatural. Sometimes they'd slow, almost hovering, with darker patches passing beneath them as if the light was carving through air itself. Mark suggested a drone, trying to sound casual. We were adults, after all, trained to rationalize the unexplained, but drones make noise, and we'd heard nothing. No mechanical hum, no distant sounds. These lights moved like delicate glass shells. I set up my DSLR on a small tripod, hoping to capture a long exposure of light trails across the foggy landscape. As the camera clicked, we watched the lights continue their mesmerizing pattern. Strange things happened around us. My watch blinked the wrong time momentarily. Jenna's compass spun wildly, and Mark's headlamp flickered between orange and white. We remained silent, witnesses to something we couldn't explain. The woods had that effect on us, making us hyper-aware of our senses. When someone said, "electrostatic," we laughed too loudly, nervously brushing off the tension. Lights began to braid and slow, one skimming low over the fog, before sinking differently than a lantern would. A perfect ring emerged where the fog dimmed, as if an invisible palm had pressed into its surface. The bubble of emptiness hung suspended, then drifted. My camera's live view stuttered briefly, and though the preview looked normal, the ring was absent. Jenna's phone recorded a snippet before declaring the file corrupt. We traded knowing glances, a shared understanding of the wood's strange capabilities. Curiosity pulled us downward along the ridge, our descent a mix of loose gravel and racing heartbeats. Fog rose to meet us like a living curtain. The lights grew more purposeful. They slipped behind trees, then darted across the field in jagged lines, moving as if guided by an unseen map. In the shallow spaces they passed, fog began forming curious columns, not quite smoke, not quite figures, always paired, like phantom legs emerging from mist. We said nothing at first. Then Jenna whispered, her voice hushed as if the valley might overhear. "Do you think anyone's down there?" We crept lower, approaching the tree line and scanning the meadow. No hikers, no truck lights. At the hollow's far end, the lights traced intricate patterns, lines and knots reminiscent of someone practicing rope work. They moved with deliberate patience, unlike a quick-passing airplane. Two brightest lights rose, hovering just above ground, then sliding together in a way that made the fog between them ripple. For a moment, the ripple's edge gleamed almost metallically, reflecting moonlight with an intensity slightly beyond the fog's natural luminescence. My skin prickled as I set up the tripod. The shutter opened and closed with its usual soft sound, but when I reviewed the image, something was off. Streaks where stars should be. The long exposure had captured star trails, yet the lights remained elusive. Everything we'd seen with our eyes seemed to thin out through the camera lens. We lingered until the valley's weariness crept over us, heavy as gradually stacked blankets. An unsettling sensation of being watched settled in, not a hunter's menace, but a quiet observation, like sensing someone standing just behind you from a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Small details accumulated into a growing unease. A deer waited, then walked away with purposeful intent. A distant farm dog howled, marking time. A woodpecker halted mid-rhythm, never resuming. Cold, bright stars hung overhead. We hiked back in single file, heads down. Valley lights moved independently, unhurried, and detached from our rhythm. At camp, I packed my camera. More from physical fatigue than any secretive impulse, we drank tea, debating our next move. Mark wanted to stay. Jenna opposed the idea. I remained undecided. Mountain nights demand vigilance. Someone lighter, someone listening. I lay awake, mind spinning like delicate gears. The valley breathed, beetles skittered. Twigs occasionally shifted. Around 2 a.m., when my eyelids felt paper thin, Jenna tapped my shoulder. "Look," she whispered. The lights had drawn closer, weaving a deliberate pattern within the hollow. What caught her attention was a perfectly straight line cutting through the fog, terminating at a single tree. One light paused at the tree's base, hovering almost motionless. Then, silence. Not just quiet, but an absolute absence of sound. A pressure change swept through the air. Crickets stopped mid-chirp. The world seemed to hold its breath. Jenna's soft laugh broke the tension, the kind used to maintain sanity. "That's not normal," she said. We decided to pack up, not in panic, but with calculated resolve. The gravel parking lot stretched out, and a metal sign with regulations stood at the trailhead. Cold iron filled the night air, and gravel crunched beneath my boots. Our journey was midway down the main road when a black sedan pulled up, its glossy surface gleaming like it had just left the showroom. 2 men emerged, their movements deliberate and silent. Dressed in black with sunglasses despite the moonlight, they approached with hands held forward, a gesture that seemed practiced. The thin one with a sharp nose smiled without warmth. "Evening. Any good photos?" he asked, his tone neutral as a handshake. I froze. Jenna went pale. Mark muttered something about lights. The men's expressions remained unchanged. The tall one tilted his head slightly. "Records," he said casually, but the word carried weight. The shorter man produced a card with an unfamiliar emblem, sliding it across my hand with calculated precision. "If you have images, we can archive them for further study," he stated. My mind raced to corrupt files and missing frames. Nervously, I offered my phone. We took some stuff. Some didn't save. With practiced patience, they examined Jenna's phone as if reviewing a routine document. Quick glances, a tap, a silent nod. They methodically questioned us, the time spent on the ridge, duration of light observation, whether we'd witnessed anything else. Each question delivered in a calm, measured tone, notes meticulously recorded on a small pad. Their interest seemed both casual and precise, like bureaucrats collecting routine information. Yet something beneath the surface suggested this was far from an ordinary encounter. Nature archives. The compass app had spun wildly, and my cheap watch blinked wrong. Two figures approached us, a tall one and a shorter companion, with an air of controlled precision. They said they were from a regional observation unit, documenting anomalies. Their advice sounded casual, but carried weight. "Stick to daytime hikes for a bit," the shorter man said, almost offhandedly. "It helps avoid trouble." Just like that, our freedom felt subtly constrained. I had my phone maps, my preferred routes, and suddenly taking the ridge at twilight seemed like some unspoken transgression. They were polite, professional, the kind of officials you couldn't easily challenge. A small card, a phone number that connected to a vague receptionist who confirmed a unit's existence but revealed nothing more. They left without drama, their black vehicle slipping into the night like oil. The following week felt strange. My camera's long-exposure images were either perfectly captured star trails or mysteriously segmented, with blank patches seeming cut from the film. Jenna's phone glitched on video files. Mark noticed a black sedan parked repeatedly on the road, its occupants hooded and watching. We shared our experiences with friends and colleagues, getting mixed reactions. Some sympathetic, some skeptical, some believing we'd simply inhaled too much mountain air. Life continued its rhythm. I focused on baking, timing my loaves to rise with the shops opening. Jenna returned to her graduate seminars. Mark discussed rivers and driftwood. Night hikes became a forgotten plan. Sometimes I'd contemplate texting those men, wanting to know their names, their agency, seeking some concrete confirmation of their mysterious visit. I was about halfway through my usual Thursday evening hunt, trudging along the ridge behind the old Thompson property in northern Vermont. Cold, damp air cloaked the landscape, with wet fog rolling off the nearby river and clinging to the pines like static. My rifle hung over my shoulder, and I carried my pack, the one with extra lenses, and my old camera for wildlife shots. Normally I wouldn't bring photography gear during a hunt, but something felt different that night. The ridge held an odd sense of politeness that made you feel almost intrusive if you probed too deeply. Months later, a local outdoor forum thread caught my attention. Someone else had documented the lights, their photos a mix of long exposure streaks and intermittent blanks. Comments ranged from technical analysis to casual jokes. Regional observation units had requested files from multiple users. Some mentioned their images looked fine initially, but small gaps appeared after the request. People offered explanations: satellite interference, cosmic rays, cheap electronics, but these justifications felt like a hasty patchwork. I still visit the ridge during daylight. At sunrise, the valley transforms beautifully. Fog burns away as if nothing unusual ever happened. Wild flowers dot the meadow, deer move in soft graze, and woodpeckers resume their rhythmic hammering. My camera stays packed, and I leave long exposures to others. Nights find me sleeping with cracked windows, a habit unchanged. Before bed, I check my phone like someone desperate to feel secure. Sometimes, I catch myself watching the trail toward the hollow, half expecting two men in black suits to materialize on a porch swing, subtly reminding us of unspoken boundaries. I have no definitive answers, only memories. The shape of strange lights, fog bowing like an invisible hand, and that casual, unsettling question posed on a dark gravel lot. Any good photos? They left the query hanging, as if this small neutral exchange could maintain some semblance of order. We continued walking that night, three of us, moonlight above, valley below, lights cutting mysterious arcs. Later, men in tidy suits with white cards approached us at the trailhead, requesting images with the precision of librarians. We went home. The hollow remained unchanged. The lights, for now, kept their own inexplicable rhythm. The silence in the forest was complete, stretching for hours without even the rustling of small animals. This wasn't the usual quiet before dusk. Something felt different, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. I was following a deer trail down toward a small clearing I knew well. When I stepped into the valley, something immediately caught my attention. The grass wasn't just disturbed, it was burned in an impossibly precise way. Concentric rings, each about 6 feet wide, formed a perfect circle leading to a central patch scorched down to bare dirt. A faint metallic smell hung in the air, like something intensely heated. Slowly, I pulled out my camera to document the scene. Low mist softened the tree edges, making the clearing look almost unreal. As I crouched at the outer ring, trying to frame the perfect shot, movement caught my eye at the opposite tree line. 2 men emerged, moving with an unnatural smoothness. Their appearance was unremarkable: black suits, black ties, clean-shaven faces, but something about them felt off. Their expressions were blank, neutral, almost mechanical. "Evening," one said, his voice completely flat. "You shouldn't be here. This is private property," he continued. I stammered about hunting, not realizing the area was owned. They approached with an unsettling precision. Unlike normal people, they didn't smile or show any typical social cues. Talking to them felt like speaking to mannequins. "Your camera," the first man said, pointing. When I didn't respond, he added, "You shouldn't have photographed this. Some things are controlled." A chill ran down my spine. I realized they had gotten close without me hearing their approach, the fog seeming to muffle their movements. Every instinct told me to run, but I was frozen in place. Legs felt rooted. 2 figures approached, their movements perfectly synchronized, mist swirling around their feet like ghostly smoke. "Do you have export controls?" I blinked, struggling to understand. "Excuse me, export controls on your device." A nervous, hollow laugh escaped me. "It's just a Canon. I'm not exporting anything." They stepped closer, and the hair on my arms stood up. I began backing toward the tree line, panic rising. Okay, I'll leave." They didn't follow, just watched. Suddenly they turned and vanished into the fog, slipping between trees like shadows melting away. No sound, no movement. I held my breath for a few seconds, then ran. I didn't stop until I reached my truck by the river access. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the keys. Looking back at the ridge, it was empty, just fog curling between pine trees. The clearing had disappeared as if it never existed. That week was strange. Sleep eluded me. Every glance at my camera brought a prickle of dread. Then, Tuesday morning at the small electronics shop I manage in Stowe, 2 men in black stood waiting. Same suits, same blank faces, same deliberate movements. I froze before the counter, coffee cup suspended. They weren't customers. "You have a moment?" the taller one asked. I nodded, leading them to the side office. "Export controls." The shorter one said, eyes scanning the camera repair corner. "On your drone." I swallowed hard. "I don't know what you mean." Their intensity suggested this was no joke. "It's very important that you answer truthfully. Did your drone record anything unusual?" Reluctantly, I admitted flying the drone near the ridge a few days ago. "Just a hobby drone. Nothing special?" They nodded as if expecting this response. "We'll need you to delete all footage immediately." I blinked. "Delete? I don't know if I can do that. It's on my SD card at home." They remained calm, voices level. "You will." I went home and sat on my couch, the SD card clutched in my hand. I stared at it, almost expecting it to move. My mind was reeling from what had just happened, the strange encounter, the abrupt departure of those men who left without a word. Backing it up to my laptop felt like a monumental task. When I finally opened the drone footage, my hands were trembling. At first, everything looked normal. The treetops from above, the river winding through the valley, fog crawling like silent smoke. Then I saw it, a dark shape hovering above the ridge, completely motionless. No rotors, no sound. The wind whipped around, bending trees beneath powerful gusts, but this shape remained perfectly still against the foggy backdrop. Zooming in revealed something vaguely geometric and metallic, yet without clear edges or features. In the frame's corner, 2 figures suddenly appeared, men in black suits with hair as dark as their clothing. Their expressions were blank, almost inhuman. They didn't wave or signal, just stood watching. Then the shadow above them shifted almost imperceptibly, and they vanished back into the trees as quickly as they'd emerged. I closed the laptop and sat in stunned silence. The memory haunted me, the clearing, those perfect rings in the grass, the cold fog that seemed to swallow everything. I haven't flown my drone near that ridge since. Sometimes, driving down back roads at evening, I catch a glimpse of a dark shape hovering just beyond the trees, motionless, waiting. Late at night, a faint metallic smell lingers in the air. Those precise grass circles return to my mind, too perfect to be natural. I haven't told anyone. Some experiences defy explanation. Some memories you simply keep to yourself, knowing no one would believe you anyway. The wind was gusting hard that Thursday afternoon in Ashland, Oregon, with the sky looking like steel wool. My drone hovered above the tree line near my apartment complex, part of a small project capturing slow pans of the riverbend. I'd been flying drones for years and felt comfortable handling the turbulent conditions. Something caught my eye. At first I thought it was a crow, but its movement, or lack thereof, was strange. While branches swayed violently and my drone struggled to maintain position, this dark shape remained perfectly still against the cloudy backdrop. A faint metallic shimmer traced its edges. Catching the last hints of sunlight, I maneuvered the drone to get a better view, circling the object. For a moment it seemed to glint dully silver. Then, in an instant, it vanished. No sound, no movement, no trace in the trees below. Checking the drone feed revealed nothing unusual. My controller beeped, low battery, so I guided it back and landed. Walking to the clearing's edge, I found no evidence of anything extraordinary. I tried to shake off the weird encounter, convincing myself it was just a trick of light. Days later, while working at my small electronics shop, 2 men in dark suits approached the counter. They had that unmistakable look of official importance, pressed clothes, polished shoes, and an air of stern purpose. Without pleasantries, one of them asked about export controls, gesturing vaguely at the drones on display. The other stood silently, arms crossed, watching me intently. Their sudden appearance and intense demeanor made the earlier mysterious sighting resurface in my mind, sending a subtle chill down my spine. I stood there after they left, staring at the notebook in my hand. My fingers trembled slightly, and it wasn't from the morning's coffee. The 2 men in black suits had just walked out like they owned the street, leaving me with more questions than answers. Earlier they'd questioned me about my drone scanning the room with an intensity that felt like they were waiting for me to slip up. When they asked about the device, I tried to sound casual. "It's just a consumer drone," I'd said. "Hobby stuff, mostly landscapes." But they seemed unconvinced. Something about commercial-grade optics and restricted areas. They exchanged a look I couldn't read. Then one pulled out a small notebook, wrote something down, and handed me a torn page. "Check the serial numbers. Report any irregularities." "Who are they?" I wondered. They didn't explain. That evening I returned to the clearing, drone in hand. I wanted to prove to myself that what I'd seen before was just a weird bird or a distant plane reflection. The wind was strong, whipping through the trees as I started filming. At first, I barely noticed it. Something about the way the light bent across the tree canopy caught my eye. Then suddenly the shape was there, the same dark form hovering about 50 feet above the tree line. Perfectly still, impossibly still, despite winds that made my drone struggle. I crept closer, staying low behind a small ridge. No sound, no engines, no hum, just wind rustling branches and that unnatural stillness overhead. I watched for maybe 10 minutes, zooming in on my controller screen. No wings, no visible propellers, just a matte dark form that seemed to blend with the grey clouds, more like a mirror, reflecting the sky in a way that defied logic. And then a sudden panicked thought struck me. What if it notices me? The night was clear, moon high and bright, as I drove home on Route 97 north of Lake Chilon. The road stretched empty, and I could hear my car's engine cutting through the silence. Just past the turnoff for a small resort town, something caught my eye near the lake. My mind was in that half-awake state where everything feels both sharp and hazy. Days later, I'd be visited by men in black suits, their intensity unchanged from one encounter to the next. They wanted my drone footage but seemed more interested in ensuring I kept it safe. Serial numbers, the first one said, holding out a notebook. I was confused. I'd just been flying in the woods, nothing classified or secret. He stared at me, then wrote something and handed me a note. "Make sure you keep your footage," it said. Then they left. No threats, no explanations, just gone. Back home, I reviewed the video on my laptop. Most looked ordinary, trees swaying, clouds drifting, but in a few nearly invisible frames, something strange appeared, a dark shape above the trees, reflecting light in impossible ways. Each time I paused, it seemed to shift, as if not bound by the normal rules of footage. I've returned to that clearing several times since. Everything appears normal, wind, trees, river. The shape hasn't reappeared, but I can't shake the memory of those men, how they knew about my drone, how much they seemed to care about my footage. Now I'm careful. I double-check batteries, South Dakota cards, everything. Late at night, I still examine the footage frame by frame. Sometimes, in the reflection of grey skies and trees, I catch a glimpse of something dark that shouldn't be there. I don't know what I filmed. I don't know who they were. But whatever it was, it mattered enough for them to visit twice, ensuring I kept the evidence. And the why? That remains a complete mystery. I've been driving that road 1,000 times before. Just another stretch of asphalt cutting through dark countryside. Nothing special, nothing unusual. Then something caught my eye over the lake. A single circular light rising smoothly from the water's surface, moving with an impossible speed that defied everything I knew about motion. No splash, no sound, just this luminous point that shot vertically into the night sky, climbing maybe 100 or 200 feet faster than any aircraft I'd ever seen. In an instant, it vanished. My hands gripped the steering wheel, heart pounding so loud it seemed to drown out the engine. I'd fishtailed to a stop, completely stunned. Stories about strange lake phenomena were nothing new. Everyone heard whispers, rumors floating around like background noise. But this was different. This was something I'd witnessed with my own eyes, something that challenged everything I understood about reality. By the time I reached the gas station, I was still processing what I'd seen, desperately trying to rationalize it as a reflection or some ordinary phenomenon. That's when I noticed them. Two men in black suits that looked like they'd stepped out of an old espionage film. One of them stared directly at me, his voice unnervingly flat when he asked, "Did you see it?" My heart started racing again. The other man waited, motionless, as if measuring my response. When I admitted I'd seen something but wasn't sure what, they simply nodded. "Careful what you say," one warned. "Not everyone understands." Their cryptic message hung in the air as I hurriedly filled my tank, acutely aware of their presence and the unspoken tension surrounding that inexplicable moment by the lake. Late one night at a gas station, something strange happened. Two men in black suits stood near the pumps, asking about a glowing light over the lake. When I looked back, they had vanished. No trace, no car, nothing. Just gone. Driving away, shadows seemed to move in my peripheral vision. I'd catch something dark near the tree line, but whenever I looked directly, it disappeared. I chalked it up to nerves and adrenaline. Days passed. I kept quiet about the incident, even avoiding mentioning it to Mike, my best friend. An unsettling pressure lingered, though, a quiet weight I couldn't explain. A week later, I asked my brother Alex if he'd seen anything weird by the lake. He hesitated before admitting he'd noticed a silent light shooting straight up, which he dismissed as fireworks. A month went by with nothing unusual happening. I started believing I'd imagined the whole thing. But then, driving Route 97 late one night, I spotted a faint glow moving beneath the lake's surface. It vanished instantly. Unnerved, I stopped at another gas station. Under buzzing fluorescent lights, I saw them again, the same two men in black, standing silently by the pumps. Something compelled me to approach them. My body felt heavy, each step challenging. The quiet man from the previous encounter finally spoke. "Did you see it tonight?" "Yes," I answered. At the gas station, coins slipped from my trembling hands as I paid. Two men stood nearby, one of them having mentioned something about the lake. The other's warning came out flat and calm, not angry, just direct. "Keep it to yourself," he said. I nodded, barely processing what was happening. When I turned back, they were gone. No trace remained, no car, no footprints, nothing. For months afterward, I drove past that lake at night, scanning the darkness. Sometimes I'd catch a quick flicker, a hint of movement in the water. Other times, nothing at all. I half expected to see those men in black suits waiting, but they never reappeared. The memory lingered like a persistent shadow. Was it just two strange men or something more? That light rising silently from the lake haunted me. I tried explaining it away. A trick of light, an overactive imagination, maybe even a drone prank. But deep down, something felt different. The quiet pressure of their gaze, the sense that they knew I'd seen something unexplainable, never truly left me. Even now, driving past that lake after dark, I can't shake the feeling of being watched from the shadows. It happened on a heavy summer evening in mid-June. Marcus, Laia, and I were walking the dirt road beside Eagle Ridge, joking casually. The mountains stretched dark blue against the horizon, holding on to the day's lingering heat. Yala suddenly pointed upward. What we saw defied explanation. At first glance it looked like a small plane, but its movement was impossible. It darted between mountain ridges with unnatural speed, up, down, behind peaks, then straight into the sky before vanishing in an instant. "Did you see that?" Marcus asked, his voice electric with disbelief. We walked home in silence after the incident, the sky still bright enough to make out the mountain peaks, trees and the road winding around their base. The object was gone, leaving no sound, no motor, no jet engine, just vanished. Everyone tried to act normal, but we were clearly shaken. I kept trying to convince myself it was just a plane or a drone, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The next day at school, something felt off immediately when I reached the guidance counselor's office. Two men in black suits sat there, older, bald, with hair so slicked back it looked artificial. They weren't staff I recognized. Mrs. in passages, Mrs. in brown. Halbrook was nowhere to be seen. Students were called in one by one. Sitting outside, I watched carefully. Each kid would return with wide eyes and a pale face, muttering nonsensical phrases like, "Yeah, just answer questions." Okay. Their demeanor wasn't upset, but a tense, frozen energy hung in the air. When my turn came, one man gestured for me to sit. "Have you noticed anything unusual recently?" he asked. His voice calm and precise, almost scripted. I hesitated. What do you mean?" he clarified. "Any disturbances in the sky? Sounds, lights, movements that don't match conventional aircraft?" My mind raced. Was he asking about last night or the night before? I tried to sound casual. Yeah, maybe. I saw something over the mountains yesterday," I admitted. One man scribbled a few words in a notepad before looking up. "Describe it," he instructed. I recounted the details. Fast, darting, no sound, disappearing into the sky, keeping my voice steady despite sweaty palms. They asked about my companions. "Two friends," I said. More notes were taken. Leaving the office, I felt strangely unsettled. It wasn't pure fear, but a heavy, prickling awareness that something was watching just beneath the surface of normal life. The next few days were strange. People acted normally around me, but I kept catching glimpses in hallways, outside. That made me wonder. I first noticed them lingering near the edges of parking lots, dark-suited men, blending into the trees behind the football field. Whenever I looked, they'd vanish. The humming started late one night while I was reading in my bedroom. A low, pulsating sound, not loud, but constant. I tried reasoning it away, thinking maybe it was the heater or a transformer, but something felt off. The vibration seemed to lightly shake the windows. When Laia called the next morning, she mentioned hearing the same thing. Marcus hadn't noticed anything unusual. Curious, I tried recording the sound on my phone. The audio was strange, a constant low thrum with an odd skipping sensation, like the sound flickered for a fraction of a second every few moments. Listening to the playback made my chest feel tight. A few nights later, an unexpected knock came at the door. My parents were asleep, and I hadn't mentioned the humming to anyone. Two bald men in black suits and sunglasses stood there despite the darkness. "Evening," one said in a calm, neutral tone. "Have you experienced any audio disturbances lately?" the other asked. I was stunned. How did they know? They stepped closer, creating a strange pressure that made the room feel impossibly small. "Tell us everything," the first man instructed. "Times, duration, witnesses." I stammered from my account. The nights I'd recorded the hum, Laia's confirmation, the quick light in the mountains. They listened silently, occasionally writing notes. Their final expression was neither satisfied nor disappointed, just blank. "Keep this to yourself," the first man said. "Don't discuss it with anyone." Then they left as abruptly as they'd arrived. The door clicked shut. I stood frozen in the hallway for a long time. The humming gradually weakened after that night and vanished completely within a week. Reviewing the recording again, I noticed something peculiar. In the last few seconds of each clip, the sound disappeared. The audio would then warp slightly, as if something invisible had brushed past the microphone. Weeks later, I saw them again at the grocery store, same black attire, same sunglasses, standing quietly by the vegetables. Something was different that night. The house felt strange, the air thick with an unusual tension. My coffee sat half-finished on the kitchen table, steam long gone. It was late July, and despite the hour, the warmth clung to everything like a damp cloth. My small house on the edge of northern Wisconsin's dense pine woods seemed to hold its breath. The first sign was barely perceptible, a distant vibration similar to an idling engine, but not quite. A low hum that seemed alive, expanding and contracting as if breathing. My windows began to rattle with each pulse, a gentle but unmistakable tremor. When I pressed my hand against the glass, the vibrations coursed through me. Outside on the back porch, I scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. No wildlife, no vehicles, not a single sign of disturbance. The hum itself seemed directionless, hanging in the air like an invisible presence. Grabbing my phone, I started recording, thinking my friend Kevin might help me understand the strange sound. 3 minutes of audio captured the pulsing vibration before it abruptly vanished, leaving only silence. I played the recording repeatedly, trying to make sense of it. Underground construction, a transformer malfunction, nothing nearby matched this peculiar sound. The next morning, I asked my neighbor Harold if he'd experienced anything unusual. Weeks later, strange things lingered. During school, everything seemed normal. Friends laughed and joked, oblivious. But the mountains caught my attention more often. At dusk, I'd glimpse something moving between the ridges, too swift for an aircraft, too precise for wildlife. I never mentioned these observations to anyone. I just watched. In bed at night, my mind would drift to those initial encounters, the knocks, the questions, the notes taken. Did they target Laia or Marcus? Or was I their sole focus? No contact since then, but occasionally, when the air is perfectly still and the mountains stand dark against the sky, I hear it. That low, faint hum, pulsating, as if the world itself is holding its breath. And I know somehow I'll hear it again, even if no one else ever does. The night before had been strange. A low hum had echoed through the area, but no one seemed to acknowledge it. At work, the factory felt normal, and my neighbor said he'd been asleep, unaware of anything unusual. Around 9 that evening, while cleaning dishes, a knock startled me. 2 men stood at my door, tall, impeccably dressed in black suits with crisp white shirts and polished shoes. They looked like they'd stepped right out of a professional photo shoot with no badges or identification. "Evening," the first man said. "We're checking with residents. Have you had any audio disturbances lately?" The phrasing struck me as odd. Not a casual, "Did you hear something strange?" but a precise audio disturbances. When I asked about their organization, he responded, "Federal Survey Group. We're documenting unusual occurrences." I mentioned the hum from the previous night, carefully avoiding any reference to a recording. Both men nodded subtly, as if this was precisely the information they sought. The second man remained silent, holding a notebook but not writing. "Did you record it?" the first one asked. I froze, wondering how they knew. I denied making any recording. They exchanged a cryptic look. "If it happens again," the first man instructed, "please do not attempt to capture it. Just note the time." Then, without a waiting vehicle, they walked away in perfect sync, disappearing into the pine shadows. My heart raced as I locked the door. The entire encounter lasted mere minutes, but left me deeply unsettled. How could they have known about a recording I'd told no one about? That night, sleep eluded me. Every house noise, every distant sound made me jumpy. I repeatedly checked the windows, half expecting to see someone watching. The next day, I tried to play the recording. The file was listed on my phone with a 2:03 a.m. timestamp. But when I attempted to open it, the player reported File cannot be opened. Connecting the phone to my laptop yielded the same result. The file existed, but was empty. Though I haven't heard the hum again, those men haunt my thoughts. Sometimes in the late night I could swear I see two figures walking past the wood's edge. Moving silently, I never step outside to check. A week has passed since they came by, and I can't stop replaying everything in my head. The hum seemed to exist everywhere at once, a sound that defied explanation. Something changed that night. The recording vanished, and strange men appeared who knew details before I even spoke about them. I've tried returning to work, attempting normalcy, but an unsettling feeling persists. Someone or something is watching. Now I close windows at night, even when the heat is suffocating. In moments of silence, a faint pulse vibrates just beneath the house's skin. I recognize this isn't something most people would understand. Talk like this gets you labeled as crazy. But I can't let it go. Each night follows the same ritual. Checking the clock, scanning the windows, anticipating their return. My phone stays on the counter, a sentinel against the unknown. When pine needles rustle in a particular way, the wind seems to carry a haunting resonance. Are they waiting out there, ready to restart whatever began that night? The sensation isn't overtly terrifying. No screaming, no dramatic horror. Instead, it lingers just under everything. A persistent wrongness I can't explain. I've attempted rationalization. Maybe an electrical anomaly, a mental glitch, or a truck with an overpowered subwoofer. But I know what I heard. I know who arrived the next evening, standing unnaturally still, asking impossible questions. I still live here, but differently now. Blinds stay closed, doors remain locked. Every passing car triggers a reflexive window check, half expecting a figure in a black suit. Even in silence, that vibration remains, just beneath my feet, just under the floorboards. Something happened, something inexplicable, and it left its mark. My last shift at the industrial park that night had been routine, just pushing a mop through the main lobby around 3:30 a.m. Nothing suggested what was coming. The night was cold for early September, with that late summer warmth that always gets cut by a sharp breeze when a door opens. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in an uneven aging rhythm, and the HV's low hum made the building feel like it was breathing. I had my headphones in, playing an old country station, just enough to drown out the overwhelming silence. When I stepped out of the east side service door to take out the trash, something immediately felt off. The loading dock lot was empty as usual, but something was different. That's when I saw it, a figure that glowed faintly, pale and white, moving across the lot in a way that defied normal movement. It wasn't walking exactly, but sliding, almost floating above the ground. I froze. The shape was vaguely human, but seemed wrapped in light or fog. I squinted, thinking maybe it was a strange reflection from the security lights. But every overhead light was steady, and this glow didn't match any of them. Then, just like that, it passed behind a line of trailers and vanished. No sound. No gravel crunching, no engine running, nothing. I stood there, staring, waiting for it to reappear. My first instinct was to dismiss it as imagination, maybe a trick of the light, or a shadow playing games, but that cold, tight feeling in my stomach told me otherwise. I tried to shake it off and finish my rounds, constantly glancing out the windows. Around 5 a.m., while locking up the east doors, I noticed something else. A small car parked on the far side of the lot. No headlights, no running engine. I hadn't seen it when I arrived at 11 p.m. and no one was around. I figured it might be a co-worker's car left overnight, though something didn't quite add up. The lot was big enough that people sometimes parked to sleep or rest. As the sun started touching the horizon around 6 a.m., washing the lot in pale light, I walked to my car. That's when I froze again. 2 men were standing there, and suddenly everything felt wrong. The morning light was dim when they appeared, standing by my car. 2 men in crisp black suits and pressed hats, their faces pale and almost blank. Their stillness was unnerving. "Morning," one said, his voice flat and rehearsed. He asked about security lights malfunctioning. I blinked, clutching my keys. "I don't think so. Everything looked fine." The second man nodded slowly. "Good. Things can easily go unnoticed in an empty building." I felt stupid, nervous, my eyes darting between them and my car. They didn't smile. They didn't move. Just stared, waiting for me to say something more. "You're the janitor?" the first one asked. I swallowed hard. When they pressed about anything unusual, I hesitated. The glowing figure I'd seen flickered in my mind. Something about their calm, calculated presence made me feel that speaking could be dangerous. So I shook my head. They seemed satisfied. "Have a safe day," they said, walking away with an unnervingly smooth, synchronized pace. They disappeared behind the trailers, leaving me unsettled. I've worked night shift for 2 years, and nothing like this had ever happened. Normally, a raccoon knocking over a trash bin was the most excitement I'd get. But these men were different. A week later, I asked a co-worker if anyone had been in the lot that morning. He said no, nobody unusual, but I couldn't shake the memory. Later, I told my wife about the strange encounter. She laughed it off as a dream or a prank. I wasn't convinced. That afternoon, I drove past the park. Everything looked normal, lights working, lot empty, but those two men and their precise, unnatural manner kept haunting me. The lot had been empty. No cameras showed anything odd, yet I couldn't forget the glow, the movement, and how those men appeared exactly when I left. Something wasn't right. I drive past the lot slower now, windows up, lights on. I park under a street lamp when I have to go inside at night, just in case. Sometimes, if I catch the corner of my eye just right, I swear I can see that same pale glow sliding across the lot. I remember that morning, the way the world felt small, quiet, and like it wasn't entirely mine. I never tell anyone at work, never bring it up. But every shift I finish, every quiet lot I leave, I feel the weight of their gaze. It was late, well past midnight, driving through the desert from Phoenix to Tucson on a Friday night. The highway was mostly empty. Dry, still air pressed against my windows, making the road feel endless. My playlist hummed softly, barely keeping me awake as the music faded into the steady rhythm of tires on asphalt. That's when I noticed it. A single star, or what I first thought was a star. Bright, steady, too brilliant to be normal. And it wasn't high up in the sky, it seemed lower, like it was tracking me. I glanced through the windshield and tried to shrug it off as a plane, a reflection, or my eyes playing tricks after hours of staring into darkness, but it didn't go away. It stayed behind me as I drove. No matter how many turns or stretches of road I went through, it kept pace just beyond my sight. I've seen strange reflections in windows, shadows that move too smoothly. Once, I thought I saw a glowing figure on the edge of the tree line behind the trailers, but it vanished before I could get close. I haven't seen the two men again, and I don't know if I want to. Every time I pass that lot or hear the hum of those old fluorescent lights, that tight, cold feeling returns. I still think about it most nights when I walk out to my car after a shift. The figure, the men, the questions. I keep wondering what they wanted to know about the lights, about me, about the lot. I keep telling myself I imagined it all. Maybe I did, but I know what I saw. And I know those men were real enough to stand there in front of me just at dawn, like the world hadn't even noticed them. Even when I'm alone, their presence lingers. The highway curved ahead, and I checked my mirrors, thinking maybe a car with an incredibly bright headlight was behind me. But there was nothing. No headlights, no tail lights, just a single white point of light moving alongside me. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly by mile marker 112, and a cold sweat formed on my neck. My heart was thumping so loudly I felt self-conscious, like the sound might bounce around the car's interior. I considered pulling over but dismissed the thought as irrational. It was just a light, right? When a rest stop appeared, I didn't hesitate. I slowed down, turned into the lot, and parked near the edge where overhead lights barely reached. The car felt quiet, the engine ticking as it cooled. I turned off the radio and stared out at the desert. Two men sat on a bench near the payphone, black suits, black ties, black fedoras, nothing unusual for the hour, but something felt off. They weren't talking, not to each other, not to anyone, just sitting perfectly straight, staring ahead as if they'd been waiting specifically for me. One tilted his head slightly, not in acknowledgement, but like a cat glancing at something interrupting its space. I tried to laugh it off, blaming exhaustion or desert-induced hallucinations. When I stepped out to stretch, the night was colder than expected. Stars dotted the sky, and that strange light still hovered directly above the lot, suspended and waiting. My feet moved slowly, almost hypnotically, despite an overwhelming urge to run back to the car. One of the men shifted his weight. He didn't approach or walk toward me, but moved in a way that wasn't quite natural. Smooth, deliberate, as if he knew exactly how I was watching him. "Evening," I said, feeling compelled to break the silence. No response. Not a twitch, not a nod. I told myself I was imagining everything. I walked back to my car, pulse quickening as I kept glancing over my shoulder. The two men remained on the bench, perfectly still, watching. That strange light seemed to have moved closer, though I couldn't be certain. I got in the car and locked the doors, staring out at the parking lot. The two men hadn't moved. The light was intensely bright now, almost white like a spotlight, with no visible source, no wires, no reflection, no aircraft, just a pure, steady glow. Starting the engine, I tried to look casual. I scrolled through my phone, searching for a reason to leave. Maybe if I pulled out slowly, it would seem normal, just another traveler stopping for gas or a quick break. When I finally pulled out, something made my breath catch. The bench was empty. No men, not behind a bush, not near a car, not walking anywhere. They had simply vanished. I blinked, shaking my head. Maybe they left when I started the car. Maybe it was nothing. Back on the highway, I stayed carefully in the center lane, scanning the mirrors. The light had disappeared too. Just empty desert stretched around me. My heart gradually slowed. The tension remained in my shoulders. I drove in silence, thinking about what I'd seen. That light had followed me for miles. Those two men, sitting there like they knew exactly where I would stop, as if they'd been waiting. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe an art project, pranksters in suits, a distant plane landing, a mirage. Nothing made sense. I didn't tell anyone for a while. I even wondered if I should call the police, but there was nothing to report. No crime, no explanation. A week later, I drove the same route, same desert, same time. I scanned the horizon for any sign of the light, the bench, the men. Nothing. Just empty desert, asphalt, and stars. Years have passed, but I still think about that night. When driving long stretches of highway, I habitually glance in the mirrors, half expecting to see that pinpoint of light. Sometimes, in the darkest, quietest moments, I think I catch a shadow on the shoulder, something perfectly still, watching. I never stop at that rest area anymore. I couldn't sleep that night, so I was sitting on the couch in my small-town Ohio duplex around 2 a.m. The August heat was stifling, and I'd cracked the windows hoping for some air movement. That's when the sound started. At first I thought it might be a distant truck or someone working late with machinery, but this was different. It was a low, steady hum with a strange pulse, like a quiet concert bass that you feel physically. My windows actually rattled with each rhythmic swell. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. I walked to the kitchen window and looked outside. Nothing. The street was completely dead and quiet. Wanting to document what I was hearing, I grabbed my phone and started recording. My plan was to send the clip to Kevin, who works with sound, to see if he could identify it. I let the recording run for about 2 minutes. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the hum stopped. Total silence. Not even a cricket chirped. When I played back the recording, the low vibration was faint but clear, with that weird rhythmic quality. I must have listened to the clip a dozen times, trying to make sense of it. Some kind of underground work, a power issue. Nothing felt right. Unsettled, I went to bed. The next morning, I checked with my upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Time Sayers' hotel. She hadn't heard anything, though she always sleeps with a fan running. At work, I asked a few guys at the garage if they'd experienced anything strange overnight. No one had. Around 9 o'clock that evening, I was home eating a sandwich when someone knocked at the door. I wasn't expecting visitors. When I opened it, 2 tall men stood there, dressed identically in black suits, white shirts, and black ties. They looked completely out of place, like they'd stepped from an old photograph. One of them spoke immediately. "Good evening. We're checking with residents in the area. Have you had any audio disturbances lately?" The phrasing caught me off guard. Not, "Did you hear a noise?" but audio disturbances. The night was dark when I was driving back from my garage outside Lincoln, Nebraska. It was late, around 11, after finishing a transmission repair for a client who needed his truck the next morning. I'd stayed until the job was done, as I usually do. Later, 2 men showed up at my place. When they introduced themselves, the first one gave a quick, insincere smile and claimed they were from a federal survey group. They wanted to know if I'd noticed anything unusual. I hesitated before mentioning the low humming sound I'd heard the previous night. Both men nodded, as if this was precisely what they anticipated. The second man pulled out a small notepad, but didn't write anything. Instead, he just held it, watching me. Then the first man asked directly, "Did you record it?" The question made me go cold. I hadn't mentioned recording anything, so I played dumb and said I'd only noticed the sound for a few minutes. They exchanged a knowing glance. The first man then warned me not to attempt capturing the sound if it happened again, only to note the time. As quickly as they'd arrived, they stepped back, thanked me for my cooperation, and walked down the driveway. No car was parked outside when I opened the door. By the time I looked out, they were already halfway down the street, walking side by side in silence. I locked the door immediately, unsettled by the encounter that had lasted barely 3 minutes. How did they know about the recording? Nobody else knew, not even Kevin. I hadn't sent him the audio clip. That night, I sat in darkness, phone in hand, waiting for the hum to return. It didn't. Every passing car and house creak made me feel like someone was outside, listening. The next day, when I finally gathered the courage to play the recording, the file was gone. It remained on the list, time-stamped at 2:07 a.m., but tapping it produced only an error message. I tried connecting my phone to the computer, but the result was the same. The file was there, yet empty, showing 0 seconds. I haven't heard the hum since that night, but sometimes, when I'm awake late, I'll glimpse 2 figures standing across the street, barely visible in the shadows. I never go out to check. Late summer heat hung heavy in the air, the kind that sticks to you even after sunset. I was driving home along county roads that stretch endlessly between cornfields, where you can go miles without seeing another soul. Windows cracked, radio humming softly. I was just trying to relax after a long day. Something caught my eye about 10 minutes into the drive, a strange glow off to the right side of the road. At first I thought it might be farm equipment, but something felt off. The light wasn't the harsh yellow of headlights or the red of tail lights. Instead, it was a soft whitish blue, spread out wide and steady, like a welding shop light but broader. As I got closer, I realized the glow was coming right from the middle of the cornfield. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder and cut the engine. About 50 yards from the road, the corn rows were bathed in this ethereal light, each stalk casting sharp, distinct shadows. Then I saw it. Not a tractor, not anything I'd ever seen before. A flat disc, maybe 30 feet across, sitting quietly between the rows. The light wasn't shining on it, it was coming from within. The entire surface seemed to glow faintly, as if the metal itself was illuminated. I sat in the truck, frozen. Part of me wanted to investigate, but I'd left my phone back at the shop. Curiosity eventually won out. I turned around, drove back to grab my phone, and returned to the spot. But everything had changed. The glow was gone. Scanning the road, I couldn't see the disc anymore. Instead, 2 men in black jackets and pants stood near the field's edge. They weren't farmers. No reflective vests, no caps, no equipment. Just standing perfectly still, facing the road. I slowed down. One raised a hand in what seemed like a half wave, signaling me to stop. I usually run at night after work around 10 p.m. The park near my place in Northern Virginia has a 2-mile trail that loops through woods and an open field. It's not lit, but I always wear a headlamp. Most nights, the trail is empty except for the occasional dog walker. One night, something strange happened. As I rolled to a stop near a cornfield, a man waved me down. In the dim moonlight, I saw his face clearly, pale skin, clean-shaven, maybe mid-40s. His expression never changed when he spoke. "Fields closed tonight," he said. Just that. No greeting, no explanation. I looked past him into the rows. No equipment, no tanks, no lights, no engine noise, just dark corn swaying in the night breeze. I asked about a light I'd seen, but he repeated the same flat statement about field closure. Another man stood a few feet back, hands at his sides, staring. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he seemed older. Neither looked like they belonged in a cornfield at midnight. I nodded, apologized, and drove away. Checking the rearview mirror, both men were still watching me. By the time I got home, I was wired. I kept thinking about that first unnatural glow, how the disc seemed to light the corn from underneath. but the men stuck with me more how they appeared so quickly, like they'd been waiting. Their explanation didn't make sense. Farmers don't spray fields at night without machinery or lights. The next day, I drove the same road in daylight. The field looked normal, rows intact, no track signs, no burning, no equipment. I slowed where I'd seen the glow and briefly thought I saw a faint ring in the dirt between corn rows, but maybe it was just where irrigation had cut deeper. I didn't stop to check. I've passed that field many times since, and I've never seen anything like it again. But late at night when I'm driving home, I'll slow down without realizing it, scanning for any strange light. And every time, I half expect to see those two men standing there again, waiting. Early October brought one of those nights where stars scattered across the sky with perfect clarity. I'd left my phone in the car, unusual for me, craving a break from constant noise. Crickets and my footsteps were the only sounds breaking the silence. Halfway through my second lap, I slowed as I entered the open field, the one stretch without trees where the sky stretches uninterrupted. Leaning over and catching my breath, I tilted my head back. That's when something odd caught my attention. A hand-sized patch of stars seemed slightly off. At first, I dismissed it as post-run visual fatigue. But watching closely, I realized these stars were different. They weren't twinkling like the others, instead appearing dull, almost veiled. The entire section moved incrementally, sliding left, then stopping abruptly. Blinking repeatedly, I tried to understand what I was seeing. No clouds obscured the sky, the rest remained sharp and crystal clear. Switching off my headlamp confirmed my suspicion. Something was definitely wrong with that specific section of sky, like a square cutout being dragged across the starscape. An unsettling feeling crept over me. Not fear, exactly, but a profound sense that I shouldn't be observing this. I turned my headlamp back on and resumed running, eager to complete my loop. The parking lot was empty when I'd arrived, so I wasn't prepared for the scene that greeted me. Two men stood leaning against my car hood. Their appearance was distinctly out of place: black jackets, black pants, dark shoes. They looked too polished, too deliberate to be casual parked visitors. As I approached, they remained motionless. When I was near enough, one spoke with an eerily calm, almost conversational tone. "Enjoy the illusion." Those exact words hung in the night air while I stood there, still catching my breath, trying to comprehend what was happening. I was fishing out of Booth Bay Harbor on a late September morning. The temperature was mild enough for solo work, but a thick fog blanketed the water. My small 20-foot lobster boat had taken me a few miles past the usual fishing grounds. This wasn't a trap-running day. I was simply dropping nets to see what I could catch before the season tapered off. Everything felt strangely muted that morning. The engine's rumble, the seagulls' cries, even the waves hitting the hull seemed hushed by the dense fog. Around 8 o'clock I started pulling in my first net. It was mostly filled with junk and seaweed, with just a couple of small catches. Later I found myself in a field after this fishing trip. Two guys approached me, their expressions blank and unreadable. The taller one studied me intently, tilting his head slightly. When I asked what they meant, they remained silent. One simply repeated a cryptic question. "Did you enjoy the illusion?" I felt uneasy. My keys were in a small pouch on my shorts, and I kept my hand near them, ready to unlock the car. They were blocking my path. I told them I needed to leave. The taller man stepped aside slowly, never breaking his gaze. The other stood by the driver's side door. I unlocked the car with the fob, startling myself with the flashing headlights and sound. The guy by the door moved to the front, giving me space. I quickly slid in and started the engine. One of them leaned down to my window, not knocking, just positioning his face level with mine. Wearing dark glasses in the night, I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt his stare. "Best not to look up too long," he said before straightening. Both men turned simultaneously and walked across the lot, disappearing into the dark woods, not toward a car or street, but directly into the trees. I sat idling, my headlights pointed at the trailhead, half expecting them to reappear. They didn't. I drove home, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The next morning, I returned to the spot. In broad daylight, with families, walking dogs and kids cycling, everything seemed normal. No sign of the mysterious encounter remained. I stood in the same field spot, but couldn't locate that moving patch of stars. Now, I still run there, but never without my phone and always avoiding prolonged glances at the sky when passing that field. On my second haul, the net felt heavy and unbalanced. Initially, I thought I'd caught something like rocks or an old lobster trap, but when I pulled it aboard, a strange metallic object was tangled in the mesh. Not much bigger than a basketball, it was an oval shape with odd seams across its surface. The metal looked dull, almost like brushed steel with scorched patches. When I tapped it, it felt different from normal metal, hollow and lighter than expected. I was examining the object, wondering if it was airplane debris or a broken buoy, when another boat engine sound caught my attention. Boat traffic wasn't unusual out here, but this sound grew quickly. Through the thick fog, a sleek black boat with no visible markings approached. 2 men in matching black jackets and caps stood aboard. One shouted, "You pulled something that doesn't belong to you." Their stern demeanor immediately made me uneasy. They pulled up close, and I could see their clothing looked almost like uniforms, though without any identifying patches. Both wore sunglasses, which seemed bizarre in the foggy conditions. The driver stated flatly, "That's military debris. We'll be taking it." I was confused and wanted more information. When I asked about their branch, they repeated the same line robotically, "It's military debris. We'll be taking it." Their sudden appearance and demanding tone made me suspicious. I insisted on seeing identification before handing over the object. They remained silent, staring until I looked away. One man reached out with a gloved hand, expecting me to comply. I refused, saying I'd call the Coast Guard to verify the situation. At that moment, their entire approach shifted dramatically. The fog swallowed them up almost as quickly as they'd arrived. Their engine noise faded until I was alone in the grey silence. 2 strangers had just boarded my deck without invitation, their movements deliberate and practiced. One had carefully untangled a metal object from my net and carried it back to their boat, setting it down gently on their hull's floor. I stood frozen, hands gripping the rail, feeling unsettled. Something about their calm demeanor made my stomach knot up. I was angry but stayed silent. They had told me not to speak about what I'd seen, but several details were gnawing at me. First, their boat had no lights, a violation of every maritime regulation I knew, especially in such thick fog. Second, they had appeared instantly when I pulled the object from my net, despite no other boats or aircraft being visible. How did they know exactly where to find me? When I returned to the harbor around noon, I wanted to casually mention the encounter, but each time I tried to speak, the words caught in my throat. How could I describe 2 mysterious strangers in a black boat without sounding completely crazy? That night, sitting in my truck and filling out my logbook, a dark sedan with tinted windows slowly crawled past my house. It paused at the end of the lane, then silently drove away. I dismissed it as nerves from the morning's strange incident, but it happened again the next evening. Same car, same slow approach, same silent departure. By the third night, I was watching through the blinds. 2 shadowy figures sat in the front seats, unmoving, just watching. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Something was very wrong. I was hauling pallets from Fort Wayne west on I-80. Around 3 o'clock in the morning during a cool May night, the highway stretched empty, with only the occasional headlight passing the other way. Sky clear, road silent, except for my engine's steady hum. Then I saw the glow ahead. At first I thought it was construction lighting, suspended low over the highway maybe 50 feet above the asphalt. When I slowed and leaned forward, I realized it wasn't a light tower at all. The shape was triangular with 3 white corner points connected by a dim glow. Sharp and distinct, unlike any aircraft I'd encountered, it hovered completely motionless. No sound, no movement. My rig's headlights caught its underside for just a moment, metallic and smooth, almost like polished stone. Heart racing, I eased into the left lane. The road was completely empty, just me underneath this strange object. As I passed beneath it, my CB erupted with loud static that made me flinch. Dashboard lights flickered briefly, then I was through, glancing back in my mirrors. The triangle remained fixed, slowly shrinking in the distance. I kept my hands tight on the wheel for the rest of the run, half expecting it to reappear, but nothing happened. I rolled into the service yard around 5, parked, and told no one. The next night seemed ordinary enough, but months later, something still nags at me. like those moments when a car lingers too long in my rearview mirror, or how those unknown men once stood facing my house, waiting. They appeared out of the fog that morning so quickly, as if they'd been tracking me, knowing exactly what I'd pull up before I did. After that, I stopped taking the boat out alone, staying closer to shore. I never saw the black boat again, never clearly saw their faces, but the memory remains sharp and unsettling. The late-night truck stop diner was half empty, the usual scene just outside Joliet. An exhausted waitress seemed ready to fall asleep standing, overhead lights buzzing softly. I slid into a booth, ordered coffee and eggs, and set my logbook on the table. That's when I noticed them. 2 men in plain black suits, white shirts buttoned to the top, sitting directly across from me about 12 feet away. They weren't like businessmen at a late meeting. No food, no drinks, nothing in front of them. Just sitting perfectly still, hands folded on the table. Their heads were angled just right to watch me without staring, obviously. Every time I looked up, they hadn't moved. No conversation between them, no shifting, no drinking, completely motionless. When the waitress brought my coffee refill, I asked her casually, "Those guys been sitting there long?" She glanced over, then back at me confused. "Who?" I gestured to the booth across from me. She shrugged, saying she hadn't seen anyone like that tonight. Something felt off. I finished my meal quickly, tossed some bills on the table, and stood up. Walking past their booth, I noticed they were still in the exact same position, hands folded, facing forward. They didn't even glance at me as I passed within arm's reach. Outside, the cool night air surrounded me. The parking lot was quiet except for a refrigeration unit's low rumble. I turned back toward the diner windows and saw the booth was empty. No sign of how or when they'd left. No door chime, no footsteps, no car pulling away. Just gone. Back in my truck, I locked the doors and sat for a while, engine idling. My logbook sat on the passenger seat, the page I'd been writing on now blank, as if nothing had been recorded. I was working the night shift at a distribution warehouse on the edge of town. The place sprawled out massive, 15 loading bays, a small office block attached, and about 3 acres of fenced-in lot. My job was straightforward: watch monitors, log truck arrivals, and do occasional walk-rounds. Most nights were dead quiet. That night, the weather was clear and cold. A wind kicked up now and then, but nothing that triggered the motion sensors. Halfway through a cup of stale coffee, I glanced at camera 12, which covers the far corner of the southern yard. No lights out there except the dim perimeter ones. At first I thought the image was glitching. Then I leaned closer. Something was sitting low behind the far fence line near the trees. Not a truck, not anything I recognized. It wasn't throwing shadows like it should have. The thing glowed faintly, not like a spotlight or headlight, but a soft whitish light that seemed to pulse. I squinted, thinking maybe a neighbor's weird lamp had reflected on the lens. But no, it was solid and motionless. Checking other cameras, I saw it didn't show up on 13 or 14, which made sense since those angles were blocked by storage containers. Camera 12, though, had a clear view. I wanted to grab my phone and snap a picture of the monitor, but something held me back. Part of me didn't want to move. I watched for maybe 30 seconds. Then the glow shifted, tilted or rotated, but without a sound. If it had been a truck or machinery, I should have heard something even from a distance. In less time than a blink, the thing vanished. No fade out, no movement, just gone. I was still staring at the empty yard when the front gate camera's motion feed popped up. A dark van, no logos, no readable plates, pulled in. Later, driving through the night, I thought about that moment. My eyes fit to the mirrors more often than usual. Every set of headlights behind me made me tense. Nothing followed. Nothing strange appeared in the sky. The next morning, parked at a rest area, I checked my logbook. The page looked untouched, clean as if I'd never written on it. Now, I don't fuel at that stop anymore. And when I see a triangle of lights in the sky, even far off, I keep my eyes firmly on the road. 2 men arrived at the security office in an unmarked van at 2 a.m. Nothing about their appearance seemed ordinary. Black suits, white shirts, and black ties. They didn't look like typical inspectors or delivery workers. The taller one had an exceptionally pale face that appeared almost grey under the security lights, while the shorter man kept his head down, seemingly studying the ground. When they approached, I buzzed the intercom and asked if I could help them. The tall man looked directly into the camera and spoke in a completely flat, emotionless voice. "We need access to the southern loading bay." His request immediately struck me as odd. This loading bay isn't on any public map. It's an older, unused section hidden behind newer expansions, known only to management and security staff. I hesitated to respond. The man repeated his request verbatim. When I asked who they were with, the shorter man glanced at his companion and simply said, "Time-sensitive matter." Something felt deeply wrong. They stood unnaturally still, no shifting, no looking around, just waiting. I claimed I needed to call my supervisor, but the taller man stated they'd already spoken to him. I knew this was impossible. Dennis, our on-call supervisor, lived 2 towns away and would have informed me about any expected visitors. The shorter man then stepped closer to the security door. What caught my attention were his eyes. They didn't reflect light like normal eyes do. They were flat and dark in a way I'd never seen before. As I reached for the phone to deny their entry, they suddenly turned and walked back to their van. No argument, no protest, just a smooth, casual retreat. The van pulled away without headlights, gliding down the access road and disappearing into darkness. When I checked the road cameras, they were inexplicably absent, despite the road having only 2 turns before reaching the highway. I returned to camera 12. The yard remained empty, still and dark, as if nothing had ever happened. During my shift, silence hung heavy. The building creaked, making me tense. No vans appeared. No strange shadows lurked behind the fence. Later, when Dennis arrived at 6 to take over, I shared what I'd seen. He stared like I was playing a joke. According to the records, no visitors had been logged. We pulled up the gate camera feed. The recording for that time slot was mysteriously gone. A corrupted file, the system claimed. Every other camera worked perfectly, except camera 12. That one went black for about 4 minutes, right after I first noticed the strange glow. After that, I kept quiet. I'd spent over 10 years flying small aircraft, mostly charter and sightseeing trips. This particular afternoon was typical, a short flight from Billings to a private airstrip near Sheridan. The day was cold and clear, with thin, high clouds creating a washed-out silvery light that couldn't quite pierce through the winter sky. About 30 minutes before landing, something unusual caught my eye. Initially, I thought it was just an odd cloud break catching sunlight, but it moved quickly. A metallic disc dropped vertically from the cloud layer, perfectly straight, no tilting, no wavering. It stopped midair, hanging for maybe 2 seconds before shooting horizontally and vanishing into the mountain haze. No sound, no trail, nothing. My first instinct was to rationalize it as another aircraft seen from an odd angle, but there were no wings. The object was too smooth, too precise. I kept checking my instruments, expecting something to malfunction. Everything remained normal. As I landed and taxied toward the hangar, I noticed them. 2 men standing just inside the building's shadow, black suits, white shirts, dark ties, no coats. Despite the 25-degree temperature, one tall and thin, the other shorter with broader shoulders. Both were unnaturally pale, as if they hadn't seen sunlight in months. They didn't move at first, just watched as I shut down the engine and climbed out. Then the taller one stepped forward. "Mr. Harlan," he said in a flat, almost mechanical voice. "Sometimes now, when I'm working night shifts in the lot, I find myself glancing toward that distant corner, half expecting to see that pale light pulsing in the darkness again." 2 men approached me, and I struggled to remember how they knew my name. The shorter one spoke first. "We'd like a moment of your time." He held a clipboard with papers clipped to it. Something felt off about the entire situation. I'd landed moments ago, and the airstrip seemed eerily quiet. No fuel truck driver, no usual ground crew, just these 2 men talking about an aerial event I'd apparently witnessed. "We understand you observed an aerial anomaly," the taller one said. I hadn't reported anything. In fact, I was still processing what I'd seen myself. "I saw something," I admitted carefully. "Not sure what." "That's standard procedure for atmospheric interference reports in controlled airspace," he replied, sliding the clipboard toward me. The form had dense text, but 2 phrases jumped out: atmospheric interference and no threat to flight safety. They wanted my signature, essentially confirming whatever I'd seen was a known unremarkable phenomenon. I hesitated. "Who are you with? Federal jurisdiction?" The shorter man stated flat. "Which agency?" He repeated only, "Federal jurisdiction." The wind picked up, making the hangar doors rattle. I was alone with these two, no witnesses. The taller one's tone shifted. "You did see atmospheric interference," he said. Not a question, but a statement delivered with strange certainty. "I saw a metallic object," I counted slowly. The shorter man stepped closer. His eyes were unusual, uniformly grey, almost artificial. "The object you saw was not metallic," he corrected. "It was atmospheric interference." I glanced at the dark terminal windows, hoping someone might appear. Silence surrounded us. The taller man extended the clipboard again. "Please sign, Mr. Harland. We have other matters." Something inside me just wanted this interaction over. I signed without reading, and immediately the shorter man tucked the paper away. They stepped back in perfect synchronization, as if our conversation had been a predetermined script. No response, just a subtle nod from the taller figure before they vanished into the hangar's shadowy depths. I hesitated, unsure whether to follow. When I finally stepped inside, the space was completely empty. No open doors, no possible escape route I could see. A distant plane engine broke the eerie silence, and suddenly everything felt normal again. My usual ground crew member appeared, asking about fuel. I mentioned the two mysterious men, but he looked confused, insisting no one had been around all day. I didn't argue. I fueled up and left, but later discovered something strange. My flight log, the notepad where I always jot down quick landing notes, was missing. The pen remained clipped to the side, but the notepad had disappeared. Those men were never seen again. "My name is Lena Ortiz, and storm photography has been my passion for years. There's something magnetic about lightning's raw energy slicing through the sky. This particular evening found me on the town's outskirts, waiting to capture nature's electrical drama. The night was heavy and still, charged with anticipation before the thunderstorm. I'd positioned myself near a dirt road, where power line pylons stretched across an open field, a familiar location that felt different this time. The air seemed unusually thick, oppressive. An unnatural silence hung everywhere. No cricket sounds, no wind, just pure, heavy quiet. Watching the clouds darken, camera at the ready, I waited. Suddenly, a lightning bolt cracked brilliantly close. I snapped the photo. As I lowered the camera to review the shot, something odd caught my eye. Between two power line pylons, a dark shape flickered briefly, a perfectly round silhouette shifting like a shadow. Not glowing or flashing, just present. I blinked, wondering if it was a trick of light, perhaps a drone or bird. Zooming into my recent photo confirmed what I'd glimpsed. A faint but distinct round shape hovering near the electrical towers. I was out taking photos during a storm near some electrical pylons when I noticed something strange in my shots. A dark disc-shaped object appeared in the lines, just off-center. The lightning had illuminated it, and it looked solid, not like a reflection or camera trick. My heart raced, but I tried to rationalize it as a weather balloon or some camera artifact. Over the next couple of days, I couldn't stop thinking about that photo. While editing at a quiet downtown cafe, a man in a plain black suit approached my table and sat down without warning. His calm but intense voice caught me off guard. "I see you've been photographing the storm near the pylons," he said. Before I could respond, he grabbed my laptop and printed a black and white copy of the photo with the mysterious dark disc. He slid the print across the table, fixing me with a penetrating stare. "If you decide to share this image, consider framing it differently," he said cryptically. Then, as quickly as he'd appeared, he was gone. Examining the print, I noticed something new. Subtle distortions around the disc, like the air was bending or shimmering. Strange things started happening after that encounter. My phone began dropping calls unexpectedly. The GPS would malfunction, showing me in locations I'd never been. I felt watched. Men in black clothing blending into crowds, always just at the edge of my vision. Determined to understand what I'd seen, I returned to the pylons during another storm. The wind whipped around me as I set up my camera. Lightning flashed, and for a moment I thought I glimpsed the disc again, flickering beyond the electrical structures, but when I raised my camera, it vanished. Unnerved, I packed up and left more quickly than usual. I was on my night shift at Brook Hill Medical's ICU, A quiet Thursday around 3:10 a.m. It's usually calm during these hours, and we just restocked the crash carts, as we always do at 3. The hallway lights near room 314 started flickering, first a short buzz, then a longer, slow dimming that caught my attention. The building's old and electrical surges from the HVAC system aren't uncommon on the 5th floor, but something felt different this time. A faint clicking sound, like standing under a transformer, made the hair on my neck stand up. Walking toward the fire exit to check the lights, I passed room 314. Mr. Garza, a long-term patient who was intubated and sedated, was moving. His hand was raised toward the ceiling, eyes still closed. The monitors showed nothing unusual, but his movements were strange. As I watched his hand fall back to the bed, movement caught my eye through the window behind him. That's when things got weird. Weeks later, I found myself haunted by another unsettling incident. A Polaroid appeared under my door, a grainy photo of my apartment window taken from outside. My reflection was visible, with a faint shadowy figure in a suit behind me. No note accompanied the photo. The feeling of being watched grew intense. I deleted all my storm photographs and stopped sharing images, but questions lingered. Who was that man? What did he want me to see differently? The men in black never directly approached me again, but their presence was always felt. Strange glitches continued. I kept photographing storms, hoping to capture that mysterious disc or figure, but it never reappeared. Some things I learned to resist being seen, and some pictures aren't meant to be shared as they are. There's a small rooftop area on one side of the unit that's strictly for maintenance. Gravel covers the space, dotted with vent hoods and big metal HVAC boxes. During the day, housekeeping sometimes props the door open to air out the linen room, but at night it's just dark. Something caught my eye, a flicker of movement behind a vent stack. A tall, narrow shape standing eerily still, watching. I thought it might be security, but we don't usually have anyone up there, unless something's broken. Moving closer to the window, I studied the shadowy figure. No face was visible, but the silhouette stood perfectly upright, backlit by city lights reflecting off the clouds. Its head tilted slightly, arms hanging unnaturally straight, like a mannequin trying to look human. Then the lights flickered hard, and when they stabilized, the shape had vanished. I radioed the front desk. No one was on the roof. Security checked the access hatch, still locked from the inside. I didn't report what I'd seen, chalking it up to exhaustion or a trick of the shadows. But unease crept in. That section of the unit felt colder. Other nurses joked about ghosts in the vents, but I wasn't laughing. When my shift ended, I headed to the break room to clock out. Halfway there, a man near the vending machine stopped me. He was out of place, wearing a pressed black suit, pale and neat, like he'd stepped straight from a fashion shoot. No badge, no scrubs. He wasn't looking at the machines, just standing facing the elevators, holding a slim black folder. Something made my stomach drop. As I walked past, he stepped forward and said my full name, not excuse me, but like he already knew me. I stopped. He handed me the folder. Inside was a single-page form printed on plain white paper. No letterhead, just a typed statement about an anomalous event. A hospital event unfolded during the early morning hours of April 11th between 2:45 and 3:30 a.m. A man approached me with a document demanding my signature on a form that required me to keep silent about specific observations. His demeanor was unsettling, a flat voice that sounded like a poorly translated script, devoid of any natural inflection. I noticed an unusual type-in with a symbol I couldn't recognize, a circle crossed by a line. When he insisted I sign the form for an internal review that wouldn't affect my employment record, I refused. I wanted my supervisor present before agreeing to anything. The man stood motionless, holding the folder out to me. No reaction, no words, just a blank stare. An elevator dinged, 2 individuals emerged, and suddenly he turned and walked away, heading toward the old records room before disappearing around a corner. Later that afternoon, I showed the form to my supervisor. She was perplexed, stating she knew nothing about any internal reviews or rooftop incidents. Administrative protocols required all hospital forms to go through specific channels. She took the folder, promising to investigate. The next night, she reported the folder was completely empty when she reopened it. Since then, I haven't seen the mysterious man, but occasionally, when I'm near the West Wing's supply elevator, I sensed someone watching from behind the old roof access door. The hallway lights continued to flicker at the same time. My name is Rachel, a freelance storm photographer who spent years capturing nature's most dramatic moments. This particular day started like many others, driving back from a storm chase outside Amarillo, Texas, as the sun set. The sky had been turbulent, with thunderheads building and lightning slicing through clouds. The air was thick with the distinct smell of rain and ozone. My camera gear was carefully packed, lenses cleaned, and ready. As the storm began to dissipate, I prepared to head home. It's not a glamorous profession, mostly cold nights and frozen fingers. But occasionally you witness something extraordinary that makes it all worthwhile. And this day would prove to be anything but ordinary. I was setting up my camera near a dirt road off Highway 287 when something caught my eye through the long telephoto lens. Storm clouds loomed overhead, a cumulonimbus with strange rippling edges like waves on water. Suddenly, a small metallic shape darted through the clouds. Not a plane, not a bird, leaving no trail or sound. I snapped photos rapidly, adjusting focus and shutter speed as the sleek, shiny object wove effortlessly through storm cells. Almost as quickly as it appeared, the thing vanished. Later, checking the camera negatives, the object was sharp and clear, a dark disc of polished metal, catching the last sunlight. That night, my basement dark room became my sanctuary. A red bulb cast a soft glow as I carefully processed the film, mindful of every chemical drop. I didn't want to risk losing potential evidence. As images emerged, the storm clouds and rugged landscape came into view, and there it was again, that strange metallic blur twisting through the air in ways I'd never seen before. The house was silent except for a dripping kitchen faucet. Then the basement door creaked open. No footsteps preceded it. I turned quickly to find a man in a black suit standing in the red light. Pale, sharp features, calm but serious. His eyes reflected the negatives, catching the light in an unsettling way. "Can negatives lie?" he asked, voice low and steady. I blinked, confused. He moved closer, hands folded, deliberate in his approach. Can a negative show something that isn't really there? Something that might never have existed? I shook my head, uncertain. His gaze swept the room, landing on the contact sheets pinned to the wall. "You've captured something," he said. "Something people aren't meant to see." My stomach tightened. Who was this man? He smiled, a smile that never reached his eyes. "Just someone who makes sure certain images don't spread," he explained, leaving me with more questions than answers. "I'm Tom Keller, 37, and I usually keep this story to myself. But lately, it's been weighing on me, so I'll share what happened." The basement was dim, bathed in a red light that made everything feel off. A man stood before me, polite yet commanding, someone clearly used to people following his instructions without question. My heart raced as he approached, his presence both calm and unsettling. When he spoke, his message was clear: destroy the negatives. He pulled out a small card with black text on a white background, sliding it towards me. "We keep things quiet," he said. My fingers trembled near the photographs that held something unexplainable, a metallic object I'd captured during a storm chase. My phone buzzed upstairs, a message from Mike about breakfast plans. The distraction seemed to give the stranger an opportunity. "Think it over," he said, then quietly walked out, leaving me alone with my thoughts and those troubling images. In the days that followed, strange occurrences became my new normal. Camera gear would shift when I wasn't looking. Phone calls dropped mysteriously. Soft footsteps outside my windows at night revealed nothing when I investigated. Who would believe such a story? A random man demanding I erase evidence of something incredible. Then things got truly bizarre. The metallic object in my negatives vanished completely. Not blurred or damaged, simply gone. Digital backups confirmed the same impossible absence. I checked repeatedly, unable to comprehend how something so clearly captured could disappear. Now I keep the developed photos, that cryptic card, and my camera in a box under my bed. On stormy nights, I contemplate returning to storm chasing, but something always stops me. A lingering uncertainty about what I witnessed and the man's warning. Maybe negatives can lie? Or perhaps some mysteries are better left unexplored. I've always been fascinated by trains. Old tracks, signals, The whole world of rail transport has been my passion for as long as I can recall. My hometown in upstate New York sits close to abandoned industrial lines where rust consumes the metal and weeds push through weathered wooden ties. Before dawn one crisp fall morning, I set out to explore a specific abandoned track running through woods near an old quarry. Some local stories mentioned strange lights in the area, but I was mostly seeking quiet moments with my camera and the silent rails. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, that soft blue-gray moment before sunrise. The woods were damp with overnight dew, filling the air with scents of wet leaves and moss. Gravel crunched beneath my boots as I walked, the only sound breaking the morning silence. About 100 yards ahead, something unusual caught my eye. Sitting directly on the tracks was a craft unlike anything I'd ever seen. It resembled a wingless airplane, but smaller, perhaps the size of a large car. Its surface gleamed with an impossibly smooth metallic finish free of rivets or visible seams. A matte grey tone allowed it to blend almost seamlessly with the misty rail environment. No markings, no lights, no movement, just present. I froze, an unexpected unease settling over me. Carefully, I raised my camera and snapped a few photographs, trying to capture details through the fog. The object's shape was angular yet fluid, seemingly designed for sliding or hovering rather than rolling. Its presence felt distinctly out of place. Just as I considered moving closer, a distant engine hum caught my attention. Turning toward the road, I expected to see a shore, maintenance crew, or early commuters. Instead, a black sedan emerged, stopping at the tree line near the track entrance. The driver's window rolled down and a man stepped out. Tall and appearing to be in his late 40s, he wore an expensive charcoal suit without a tie. Dark hair was slicked back, and his face bore a practiced, emotionless expression. Something about his calm demeanor suggested he was not there by accident. I stood there for a moment after the man in the suit abruptly left, staring at the craft that was now fading from view. The morning mist thickened, and soon only the empty rails and dew remained where something extraordinary had just been. I felt uneasy but intensely curious. Over the next few days I kept returning to the spot, but there was no trace of the craft or the mysterious man. When I shared the story with close friends, most laughed it off. One suggested it was probably a military operation, but nothing about the encounter felt military to me. No helicopters, no patrol cars, no warning signs. Strange things started happening after that morning. During walks near the tracks, I'd hear footsteps behind me, but when I turned, no one was there. Shadows would slip between trees, always just out of focus. My phone began acting weird too. Calls would drop when I tried certain numbers, and pictures taken near the site came out blurred with strange light streaks. One late evening while driving home, headlights appeared behind me. At first it seemed like normal traffic, but the car maintained exactly my speed for miles without attempting to pass. At a stoplight, a black sedan pulled up, the driver staring straight ahead, unmoving. I changed routes, and the car followed me right to my driveway before vanishing. I tried convincing myself I was just getting paranoid, but then the phone calls started. Picking up would reveal only silence, sometimes with slow, steady breathing, followed by a soft click and then nothing. I stopped answering after that. The whole experience left me unsettled, wondering what had really happened that morning by the tracks. The night was quiet and the road was empty. Just another late drive home from my second shift at the packaging plant outside Greensburg, Indiana. I was about 15 minutes from home, sipping the last of my gas station coffee when things started to feel off. The radio began cutting out, dropping silence between words, and I thought it was just the station. But switching channels didn't help. My headlights dimmed, dropping to half brightness for a few seconds before returning to normal. That's when I slowed down and saw it. Off to the left side of the road above a cup field with an old half-collapsed barn, something hung in the air. Not a plane, not moving, just suspended. At first, it was just a black mass blocking out the stars. No sound, no lights, just this dark shape hovering low, maybe 50 feet up, maybe less. As I got closer, the shape resolved into a triangle. A long, flat wedge with soft, rounded corners, stretching almost across the entire field. It wasn't completely still. Instead, it drifted with a deliberate, steady movement, like a blimp but smoother. 3 small red lights mark its underside near each point. Not blinking, not even truly glowing, just present. like standby indicator lights on electronic devices. Now, like a persistent memory, these photos remain on my camera. Something holds me back from returning to those tracks, echoing the words of a man who once said, "Maybe there are places you're not meant to go." Yet on quiet, foggy nights, I could swear I hear a faint hum sliding over metal tracks that no longer exist. I rolled down my window and looked out over my shoulder, expecting some sound, a hum, anything. Complete silence surrounded me. No crickets, no wind, not even engine noise from my car. The air felt frozen, like it had stopped moving entirely. I sat watching for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, not once reaching for my phone. I wasn't scared, just acutely aware of my solitude. Gradually, the object began to rise, lifting straight up without tilting or rotating. It moved slowly, maintaining its perfect level orientation until it disappeared against the night sky. Those red dots never changed, never flashed. The thing simply faded upward and vanished. After another minute, I drove home to my house in a quiet cul-de-sac outside Westport. When I arrived, I didn't tell anyone about what I'd seen. I heated some leftover mac and cheese, took a shower, and went to bed around 2 a.m. Sleep didn't come easily. Not from fear, but because my mind was racing, unable to settle. The next morning around 7:30, I woke up. It was my day off, but the garbage truck's usual early arrival always wakes my dog. After feeding her and making coffee, I noticed something odd. A black sedan in my driveway. It looked like a government vehicle, tinted windows, no plates, engine off. 2 men in dark suits stood outside, one near the front step, the other by the car. When I cracked open the door and asked if they needed something, the man closest to the house gave a small, polite smile. "Just a few quick questions, ma'am, if you have a minute," he said. I stepped onto the porch. Without introducing himself, he asked if I'd been on County Road 700E the previous night near the collapsed barn. I confirmed I had been, returning from work. Then came his next question: "Did you see anything unusual while driving?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. He watched me intently, not threateningly, but as if carefully studying my reaction. Eventually, I mentioned seeing some weird lights in the sky. The second man still by the car called over, "Do you often imagine things at night?" His tone was genuinely curious, like someone who'd asked this question before and received serious responses. I was driving through Red Rock Canyon on a Tuesday evening just past sunset. The canyon roads narrow and winding, flanked by those steep sandstone cliffs. At this time of year, there's barely anyone else out there, just me and the road. The sky still held on to some light, but the shadows started stretching long and dark, and the temperature began to drop quick. I was heading home from a work trip in Vegas, taking the scenic route to clear my head. Never been a fan of the freeway if I can help it. It was around 7:30 when I noticed a car parked just past a sharp bend. One of those old black sedans with no plates. Not something you see every day in the middle of nowhere. I slowed down, expecting maybe a roadblock or construction, but there were no signs, no cones, nothing official. That's when the 2 guys stepped out, both wearing black suits, dark sunglasses. Even though the sun was dipping low, one was tall, maybe early 40s, the other shorter, late 30s. They walked right up to my window like they'd been waiting. The tall one didn't smile, just said, "Road ahead is closed for maintenance. You'll have to turn back." I blinked, glanced up the road, saw nothing unusual. No workers, no barriers, no equipment. "Maintenance," I said. I was awake and driving, and that I knew what I saw. The one at the car didn't say anything else. The one near me just nodded like that was good enough. That was good enough. Then he looked past me at my front yard and asked if I had any outdoor cameras. I told him no. He said understood and thanked me for my time. They both got in the car and backed out of the driveway. I watched them go. They didn't stop at any other houses, just turned out of the neighborhood and drove off down the main road. Later that day, I noticed something odd. My mailbox, which is one of those group boxes for the block, had a smear across the front, like oil or ash. Not on anyone else's, just mine. I wiped it off with a paper towel and it left this grey, greasy streak. I thought about keeping the towel, but ended up tossing it. That night my dog wouldn't go into the backyard. She stood at the door and whined, but when I opened it, she backed away. I ended up walking her out front instead. She kept looking up, not barking, just watching the sky. It's been a few weeks since then. I haven't seen anything else, but every night when I drive home from work, I take a different route. The canyon stretched out empty and quiet, rocks silent against the fading sky. I'd been trying to get home when two men in a completely unmarked black sedan blocked the road. No windows, no license plates. Something felt off. "We can't let you through," the tall one said. "It's not safe." The shorter man added flatly, "Private job, no exceptions." I tried negotiating. "Is there a detour?" "No," they told me. I had to turn around. So I started backing up slowly, checking my rearview mirror. When I glanced back, both men were already in their car, but moments later, when I looked again, the entire vehicle had vanished. No engine sound, no lights, nothing. Confused, I crept forward. No barriers, no equipment, no explanation. I pulled over and stepped out, walking around the deserted canyon road. My phone showed no signal. The dry brush rustled in the wind, but nothing else moved. Driving back the way I came, the sky darkened to deep blue with early stars emerging. About 10 minutes into the return trip, a strange light caught my attention. It hovered just above the canyon rim, not like a plane or helicopter, but a soft, steady glow, almost like a lantern suspended in the sky. I stopped at the small canyon entrance diner. Only the night cook, Sam, was there. When I described the bizarre encounter, he just nodded slowly, saying nothing. His silence seemed to confirm something was definitely strange about that stretch of road. The light continued following me, always at the edge of my vision. 2 summers ago during the Pacades, I drove to a remote location east of Lander, Wyoming, along County Road 221. The area was desolate. Nothing but scrub hills and a lone, broken windmill. I was familiar with this spot from past field work. It was quiet with zero light pollution, perfect for my plan, parking the truck off the shoulder, spreading a blanket in the truck bed, and watching the meteor shower with coffee and a camera. The sky was pristine that night. No clouds, no moon, just endless stars. I arrived early around 11 o'clock, well before peak meteor activity, but I've always enjoyed solitude. No cell service out here made the experience even better. The first few hours passed without incident. I dozed off around 12:30, and when I woke just after 2 a.m., the sky was illuminated. I grabbed my camera, setting up long exposures on a basic tripod in the truck bed. Around 3 a.m., something caught my eye on the road behind me. Initially, I thought it was the tripod's shadow, but it didn't move when I did. A shape, possibly a person, stood motionless, about 50 feet back, dead center on the road. No flashlight, no movement, just a dark silhouette. I kept watching, wondering if someone had pulled over, but I hadn't heard a car or any footsteps on the gravel. The figure remained still, unexplained. Later, back at the diner, I shared my experience. The server seemed unsurprised. "You're not the first to see things like that out here," he said. When I asked for details, he simply shrugged, mentioning lights, figures, and roads that vanish without a trace. Driving home, I constantly checked my mirrors, half expecting to see the black sedan or those men again. The road remained empty. I scanned news sites and county road updates, nothing about closures or maintenance on the canyon road, just standard warnings about loose rocks and narrow lanes. In the following days, I became more observant. I told a few friends about the encounter. Some joked about government agents or aliens, but I remained uncertain. A couple of days later, I discovered a blank scrap of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. I folded it up and left it on the dashboard, untouched since then. That night, I went to bed thinking about the men, the empty road, and the strange light. The night was different. I wasn't expecting anything unusual, just watching meteors. Then I noticed someone who wasn't moving right. My headlamp beam swept across the road, catching the shoulder and brush, but never quite reaching their face. They didn't react, no flinching, no stepping back, just standing there completely still. I grabbed my phone and snapped a quick picture. The moment the shutter clicked, they turned and walked into the darkness without a sound, disappearing behind the road's low slope. I called out, wondering if they needed help, but got no response. Chasing someone through unfamiliar brush seemed unwise, so I returned to my truck. Checking the photo later, I saw a figure that didn't look quite human, thin and unnaturally tall, dressed in something dark. The arms seemed too long, the head oddly shaped, almost featureless, like the face was blurred or turned away. I convinced myself it was just a camera trick, though something about it made me uneasy. The next morning, stopping for gas in Riverton, I experienced something equally strange. The Conoco station was nearly empty, just me and the cashier. A man in a pristine black suit entered, looking completely out of place. Mid-40s, pale skin, meticulously clean, he approached and said something bizarre. "You've seen too much light lately." When he turned, I noticed something off about his eyes. The color was wrong, pale irises, oversized pupils. "Not fake, just not right," he muttered. Then, with an unsettling calmness, he demanded my phone. "You took a picture. Give me the device." His tone suggested he already knew I would comply. I hadn't thought much about the previous night's encounter until that moment. Now, everything felt different. A couple of weeks back, just after sunset on a cool autumn evening, I was sitting on the dock behind my place. The air felt sharp and the skies were clear. I'd been trying to capture some star photos on my phone, everything peaceful and quiet as usual. While scrolling through my shots, something caught my eye. Toward the lake's center, just above the water, a dark silhouette hovered motionless. This wasn't like a bird or plane. It just stayed there, completely still. No blinking lights, no sound. At first, I thought it might be a light trick or an unusual cloud formation, but the shape was solid and sharp against the sky. I zoomed in with my phone camera. The object was smooth and oval, not shiny or reflective, just a matte black. I watched it for a few minutes as it slowly drifted sideways, just a few feet at a time. Then, without any noise or sudden movement, it shot straight up and vanished into the darkness. Later, in a gas station bathroom, something bizarre happened. I handed my phone to a stranger who somehow knew the unlock code, a code I'd never shared. He glanced at the screen, tapped in the code, then walked away and disappeared completely. Back in the store, no one had seen him leave. The cashier continued flipping through a flyer, not even looking up when I asked about the man. I checked the parking lot. No black car, no SUV, nothing. Standing by my truck, I tried to make sense of what just occurred. Then I noticed the phone was back in my pocket, though I hadn't felt anyone place it there. When I unlocked it, everything was gone. Factory reset. Only my cloud-synced contact remained, and the photo I'd taken had vanished, not even in the backup folder. That night, I connected the phone to my laptop and ran recovery software. Nothing turned up. The metadata showed a hard reset at 7:14 a.m., exactly when I was in that bathroom. I've rarely discussed this experience. Those I've told assumed I'd dreamed it. But I know what happened. That stretch of road, I've never gone back. I first noticed something strange at the lake near my house. It happened quietly, almost imperceptibly. One moment everything seemed normal, and then suddenly something caught my eye. Something I couldn't quite explain. The black car appeared in my driveway days later, parked perfectly at the end with no signs of how it got there. No tire tracks, no footprints. Just sitting silently, an early 2000s model in pristine condition with no license plate. I checked the windows multiple times, always empty, always waiting. Each morning, it returned to the exact same spot. I started leaving notes, hoping the owner would move it, but nothing changed. The notes remained untouched, the car unmoved. Something felt off, but I couldn't explain what. Then one evening after dinner, everything shifted. Standing near my driveway was a man in a neat black suit, his face shadowed by streetlight. He watched me without speaking. When I approached and asked if he needed help, he simply said, "The water ran twice." Then he walked away, vanishing into darkness. Over the next week, strange occurrences became more frequent. My phone would glitch when I tried photographing the lake. Late at night, a faint humming would drift from the water, disappearing when I investigated. One night around 3 a.m., I saw flickering lights dancing across the lake's surface. The car continued appearing every morning, silent and unexplained. The man never returned, but something remained, a sense that something unusual was happening, just beyond my understanding. 2 winters ago, in early February, I was out walking my dog Benny late at night. Our neighborhood in Spokane Valley near Pines and 16th is typically quiet, mostly ranch-style houses with older trees and minimal nighttime traffic. I wasn't expecting anything unusual, just wearing sneakers and a hoodie, with the sidewalk dry and clear. Benny's a shepherd mix who needs his late-night walk or he'll pace all night. We were heading back up our street, about 5 houses from home, when he suddenly stopped and stared straight upward. Initially, I thought he might be watching a bird or an owl, but when I looked up, I saw it too. A massive triangular shape hung in the sky, blacker than the surrounding darkness. Unlike typical aircraft I'd seen before, this object moved impossibly slow with just 3 faint white lights at its corners. No engine noise, no wind disturbance. It seemed to glide weightlessly, passing overhead at maybe 200 feet up. The world around us went eerily silent, not just the object, but everything. It felt like someone had turned down the volume, muting even our footsteps and breathing. Then he didn't bark, just sat motionless, watching until the object disappeared behind northern trees. I tried to use my phone to capture a photo, but the screen froze. It only started working again about half a minute after the object vanished. The next day, I told no one, assuming it was perhaps a military craft or an unrecognized drone. Later, strange things lingered. A soft blue glow appeared occasionally, pulsing slowly. My phone would go black when pointed toward anything unusual. The mysterious car stopped coming around, but near water, an unsettling feeling persists, like something waits just below the surface. Those words, "the water remembers," echo repeatedly in my mind. 2 days later, something strange started happening. On a Tuesday night, I woke up suddenly after sleeping for a couple of hours. No sound had disturbed me, just that inexplicable wide-awake feeling. Walking past the living room window, I noticed headlights across the street. A black sedan, older model with chrome trim, was idling in front of the Wilkins place. The car sat there, lights barely on, seemingly waiting. At precisely 3:17 a.m., the headlights flashed, not a sharp, high beam, but a slow, deliberate fade. Then it drove away smoothly, turning quietly at the block's end. The first night, I dismissed it as a weird dream, or someone turning around, but the next night, it happened again. Same time, same brief flash. And the night after that, and the next. Each time, the car was different, sometimes near the Wilkins, sometimes closer to the Morgans, but always directly across from my house. By the 5th night, I was getting worried. I set up my phone on a tripod, recording from 310 for 20 minutes. When I checked the footage the next morning, nothing. The street was empty. But I'd seen it. I'd even waved once, getting no response. I started asking around the neighborhood. Nobody else had noticed. Not the Morgans with their open blinds. Not Mr. Morgans. Harrington, who claims his dog barks at the slightest movement. My wife didn't believe me either, working nights at the hospital and dismissing it as a result of watching too many documentaries. I changed my routine. No more late-night walks with Benny. Earlier walks just after dinner, but I kept watching the window. Night after night, the car returned. Always 3:17. Always one flash. Always gone before I could reach the door. I called the non-emergency line once to report the suspicious vehicle, but something always stopped me from giving all the details. Late September in northern Minnesota, and the air had a crisp edge that hinted at fall's approach without fully committing. I'd been walking the forest perimeter since dawn, taking notes on the sparse activity in this area. The quiet was familiar, but something felt different that morning. As I prepared to return to the research station, something in the clearing caught my eye. A series of perfectly round scorch marks dotted the ground, arranged in an unusual pattern. Each mark was about 2 feet across, with roughly 6 or 7 forming a rough circle about 15 feet in diameter. These marks were deeply embedded in the earth. The soil underneath was blackened and cracked, yet strangely, no surrounding trees or plants showed any signs of damage. The clearing remained silent, with only the faint hum of cicadas and the rustle of dry leaves breaking the stillness. I stayed out late one night, keeping watch from the porch. Lights off, I stood behind the column to avoid being seen from the road. Benny paced inside, anxious about my being out of sight. At exactly 3:17, a car pulled up across the street. No headlights, just the faint glow of running lights. The engine remained on and the windows were too dark to see inside. The vehicle looked unnaturally clean, with no front license plate. I stepped out slightly for a better view. The driver's side window rolled down halfway, revealing a pale, thin-faced man in a black suit. He sat motionless, staring directly at me. We both remained completely still. After about 10 seconds, he raised his hand. Not a wave, but a flat stop signal, then slowly rolled the window back up. The car pulled away without flashing its lights. In the following nights, I kept watch. Nothing came. The street remained empty. I told myself I was relieved, but part of me missed the predictability of its presence. Now, I continue checking the street at 3:17 out of habit. Sometimes, I could swear I hear a car idling down the block, but when I look, there's nothing there. No branches snapped, no leaves burned, just those scorch marks, clean and symmetrical, like someone had used a giant hot cookie cutter to slice into the ground. I circled slowly, searching for anything unusual. No footprints, no tire marks, no signs of human activity. Just scorched earth. Something felt off. Nothing I'd studied or encountered in the field matched these marks. I took photos, made sketches, collected soil samples. Then I flagged the location on my GPS and radioed the station with a brief description. The team had theories. Lightning strike, animal territory marking, but the shape and symmetry didn't align with their explanations. The forest that day was unsettlingly quiet. I kept feeling watched, glancing over my shoulder, but nothing was there. Days later, a knock came at the station door. An old research cabin, simple and spare. Wood walls, a small kitchen, a single workroom. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened cautiously. A tall man stood there, plain black suit, completely out of place in the woods. No badge, no identification. Dark, steady eyes. His voice was flat but calm. "I'm interested in patterns in non-human behavior," he said. No introduction, no context. I showed him the photos of the scorch marks. He studied them closely, almost clinically, without visible reaction. Then he began asking detailed questions about my work, the animals I tracked, the data I collected. His inquiries felt oddly specific. Something about him made me uneasy. The way he moved, how his gaze never wavered, as if analyzing my every word and reaction. He knew exactly where the clearing was, though I'd never mentioned its location. When I offered to guide him there, he politely declined, saying he had his own methods. After nearly an hour, he left without another word. I watched him walk away through the trees, his steps impossibly silent. Late October brought a sharp, crisp air to the Cascades, somewhere between Snoqualmie and Stevens Pass. I'm Claire, a graphic designer from Seattle who sometimes needs to escape the city's constant noise. That day, I started hiking around noon, planning to cover 5 or 6 miles before turning back. The trail was mostly empty, with just an occasional runner or dog walker passing by. About 3 miles in, something caught my eye just off the path near a clump of ferns. A black briefcase sat upright on the dirt, positioned as if someone had carefully placed it there. No markings or logos adorned its surface, just a plain matte black case with scratches, suggesting it had been dragged or bumped around. Curiosity drew me closer, but the area remained deserted. The briefcase was locked tight, with no visible combination or keyhole. It resembled a hard shell case for camera gear or instruments, yet remained firmly sealed. I tried jiggling the handle and shaking it, but nothing moved. Assuming someone might return for it, I left the briefcase where it was and continued walking. Later, a man appeared near the soft forest floor. After he left, I double-checked my equipment and locks. Nothing was missing, but an unsettling feeling persisted. In the following days, scorch marks haunted my thoughts. The clearing silence, the man's unnerving calm, his seemingly knowing everything without asking. I returned to the clearing repeatedly, searching for changes or unusual signs, but nothing ever reappeared. Some nights, when the wind rustles the trees just right, a low hum seems to vibrate beneath the forest skin. Not like any animal or machine I know, just a faint, mysterious sound. I never saw the man again. No calls, no messages, just that single visit and a lingering sense that something out there was watching, though not particularly interested in me. Something felt off about the hike from the start, though I couldn't explain why. The forest seemed different, heavier, with sounds muted as if someone had turned down the volume of the world around me. I wondered if my mind was playing tricks. Near the turnaround point, I realized the briefcase I'd seen earlier was suddenly gone. No trace remained, no footprints, no disturbed ferns, Nothing. I tried to brush it off as fatigue or stress and continued my return journey. The strange occurrences didn't stop with the hike. Over the next few days, I constantly felt watched. My phone started acting weird, battery draining quickly, calls filling with static, the screen flickering unexpectedly. These little incidents were unsettling enough to make me nervous. A few days later, I returned to the trailhead hoping to clear my head. That's when I saw him. A man in a pristine black suit and tie, standing at the parking lot's edge. His hair was short and neatly combed, but his eyes were what truly unnerved me. They were hollow, not just tired, but completely empty, like vacant sockets. He watched me silently as I began walking the trail. When I turned back, he seemed about to speak, but instead quietly walked away, his footsteps barely audible on the gravel. Something told me the mysterious briefcase and this man were connected, though I couldn't explain how. Subsequent hiking trips revealed nothing. The spot where the briefcase had vanished showed no signs of disturbance. I didn't see the man again in person, but sometimes, when I'm alone, I catch a glimpse of someone in a black suit standing just beyond my peripheral vision. Questions swirl in my mind. What was in that briefcase? Why was it there? Why did it disappear? I have no answers, only a persistent feeling that something was watching, waiting, or attempting to communicate in a way I cannot comprehend. Devil's Ridge was a quiet, isolated spot I discovered while hiking near Flagstaff a couple years back. Late September brought a dry, crisp evening that turned surprisingly cold once the sun disappeared. Stars were my target that night, and the sky promised to be perfect, far from city lights, with clarity that photographers dream about. My camera gear was all set up, tripod in place, lenses ready, phone nearby. An hour after sunset, the Milky Way began to emerge. Only wind whistling through pine needles and scrub broke the absolute silence. I was deep in concentration, adjusting aperture and exposure, focused entirely on capturing the stunning night sky. That's when something caught my eye across the small valley. On a narrow rock outcrop, a figure stood motionless against the starry backdrop, completely black, no discernible features, just a dark shape that seemed impossible, unnatural. It wasn't moving, not even a slight shift. My first thought was another late-night photographer or hiker, though the location was incredibly remote. I called out softly, "Hey, you okay over there?" Silence. A second attempt, slightly louder, yielded nothing. Then, in an instant, the figure vanished. Not walked away, not hidden, simply disappeared as if it had never existed. Unease crept in, mixed with curiosity. Was it a trick of the light? A product of darkness and imagination? I tried returning to my photography, but my hands trembled slightly. Minutes later, my phone rang. An unknown number with random digits displayed. Something compelled me to answer. A distorted, cold voice spoke 3 chilling words, "We're watching," then silence. My heart raced. The air felt colder, more threatening, caught between fear and a desperate need to understand. I wasn't sure whether to flee or stay and unravel this mysterious encounter. The desert road seemed endless that night, winding through shadows that felt almost alive. After hearing that strange voice earlier, I decided to take the long route home, my nerves on edge. In the rearview mirror, I kept catching glimpses of headlights that vanished when I turned to look directly. The radio hissed with static, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Back home, I checked my phone meticulously. No missed calls, no texts. Everything seemed normal, but something felt off. The next day, my friends and I returned to Devil's Ridge, searching for any sign of what might have happened. The ground was untouched. No footprints, no disturbance in the rocks or dirt. That night, a shadow slipped between the trees across the street from my bedroom window. I tried to rationalize it as a neighbor or stray animal, but when I looked again, nothing remained. Since then, I've continued visiting the ridge, drawn by an unexplained compulsion. A quiet pressure follows me now. It's like invisible eyes watching from just beyond my perception. Occasionally, my phone lights up with unrecognized numbers. I answer, hoping for some explanation, but there's only silence. The mystery of that figure haunts me. Out there in the darkness, something remains unexplained. A presence I can't shake, can't understand, but can't forget. An unseen presence lingered, watchful and silent, hidden within the darkness of the night sky, The stars glimmered overhead, their light casting faint shadows across the landscape, while something, undefined yet distinctly aware, observed with an intensity that suggested more than mere coincidence. Its gaze was steady, purposeful, a quiet sentinel tracking below with a focus that defied casual explanation. The darkness held its breath, pregnant with unspoken possibilities, as this unknown watcher continued its vigilant observation.